Live. We'll see how true that is. Welcome everyone to my medieval sewing party. I am the creative Contessa and welcome once more to Daegu, South Korea. I am here at one of the most beautiful Starbucks in the world. I will show it to you. Isn't that gorgeous? Yes. So we're going to be having our on-site sewing party. It's a bit loud in here today because we have children. So I keep having microphone failure. So hopefully the microphone will keep the sound to a dull roar so that you can continue to hear me. I have several projects in the works at the moment. And for those of you who have been following me on my Burgundian clothing journey, I am making a new Burgundian style gown and we shall be working on that today. I have all the pieces for the gown itself cut out. So now we just have to work on the putting it all together. And I guess also, well, I have all the pieces for the gown itself cut out. I do still have to cut out the trim. I'm going to be trimming the collar out of silk velvet that I have. The collar is going to be made out of silk velvet. The cuffs are going to be made out of silk velvet, and ultimately I will be putting a trim of silk velvet all the way around the bottom, what some of you might call a guard, but was never called that as far as I can tell in 15th century English. Welcome, Susan. Yeah, another Starbucks visit. I just dropped the condottiero off at the bus station. He's wending his way towards Incheon, hopefully as incident-free as it can possibly be. So I decided to stop at my favorite Starbucks on the way home. It is on the way, basically on the metro line homeward. So, you know, here we are, gonna have a nice little sewing party. I also wanted to share with you all of the recent adventures I've been on creativity-wise, because I've been having some really great times with Dr. Minji Kim. And big news for those who might not have seen it, I'm going on Tuesday morning my time, which is Monday afternoon, evening for all of you in the Americas, and middle of the night for those of you in Europe. I will be going to the Daegu National Museum and I will actually be examining firsthand with my fingers and my eyes, with no glass between me and the garments, 16th century Korean garments excavated from local tombs. I am so excited. When I got the news that the viewing had been approved, I almost cried. And why did I cry? Because there's academic snobbery involved in viewing objects. If you don't have a master's degree or higher, they generally don't want to talk to you. Thankfully, Minji has a doctorate, and we are going to write a paper together about this topic. And Minji has been showing the museums the live stream tour I did of the historical Korean clothing collection at the Daegu National Museum. And they're so impressed with it that they're giving me permission, no master's degree, no doctorate, to look at these garments in person, because they're impressed with the level of knowledge I have despite not having an advanced college degree. So yeah, I thought it wasn't going to happen. I thought I wasn't going to get to look at these garments. And then when Minji told me it had been approved, I jumped with joy. Dream come true. Oh yeah, they will give us gloves. I don't have to bring my own gloves. They will have their own acid-free special gloves for touching these garments. And they, of course, will no doubt instruct me on how to properly handle them as per their own policies. So yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah. So over the last week and a half at this point, I've actually already started the journey. So Minji and I met up in a small city, small by Korean standards, called Hwasong, because their little city museum, and I did a tour there. Some of you got to participate in the tour. And so we actually got to see garments from high-ranking military officers. I think you'd probably be about the equivalent of a full-bird colonel, or maybe a one-star general in our modern terms. We got to see his garments firsthand, and the learnings we had there were it was really eye-opening. It was very, very interesting to learn about funerary practices, and also that garments that were once considered garments for scholars continue to be used by scholars and worn by scholars, but also became the garments of choice as funerary garments for men, which I'm not certain no one can explain to me why. And of course, I'm always interested in the why. You all know when I study history, I love understanding the why. And I asked Minji, why did that happen? What caused that to happen? And apparently, no one has been able to pinpoint why it happened. They've just been able to kind of pinpoint roughly when it started happening. Unfortunately, I do not have the level of Korean skills in order to do the kind of research that I would normally do into that question if this were in any European language. But yeah, still, I'm very, very excited by what we did learn in that exhibit. And one of the things I learned by looking at the reconstruction is that the reconstructions that are generally done here in Korea, they're done to create the look. And actually a Korean scholar here told me, actually one of the master indigo dyers that we met last Sunday in Naju told me, he said, yeah, they're not, here in Korea, they're not necessarily looking to recreate, they haven't been recreating the garments or reconstructing the garments using actual proper techniques or based on an actual in-depth examination of the order of operations of these garments. They've been recreating them so they look right. Well, I want to recreate it so that it's made right. So that's where my work, my collaboration with Minji comes in. So we're very excited about that. Yeah. For those of you just joining, welcome to my medieval sewing party. I know I'm not in medieval clothing today. I'm just in my usual modern clothes. That's because I just didn't feel like getting dressed in medieval clothing today. Mostly because we were up relatively early, so I could escort my condottiero, my beau, to the bus station, and he's taking a flight to Seattle today. Hopefully, it's flooding in Seattle, unfortunately. So I should have kitted up. I don't know why I didn't. Honestly, my medieval clothing is warmer than my modern clothing, and it's a little cold now. It's not terribly cold, but it's a little cold. So last Sunday, a week ago, I don't know where the hell the time has gone, but a week ago, I was in Naju, which is in a city very close to the southwest corner of Korea. More or less a coastal city as far as Korean standards of definition of what is a coastal city goes. And we got to go to an indigo dyeing village. What is an indigo dyeing village? Well, by Korean definitions, it's a village where hand indigo dyeing done the traditional way, and by traditional, I'm actually going to lean towards historic way, is still practiced and has been practiced since at least the Joseon dynasty. And there is a master dyer there, a master indigo dyer, who is in fact a national treasure of Korea. And it's referred to a national intangible treasure of Korea, which is kind of funny because he's very tangible. You can touch him, he's real. But I guess it's his skills they're referring to as being the intangible treasure, not necessarily the person, right? So the skills, I suppose you could view as being intangible. Anyway, he was born and raised in this village, Setgol, it was called in the Joseon dynasty. It's now called Dashimyeon. And we got to take a tour of not just take a tour, he gave us a tour. He picked us up in Naju, drove us all the way out to his remote village, and took us on a tour of the premises of his workshop, showed us the traditional historical works that they also still have going, but also introduced us to their updated methods that they can use to do natural indigo dyeing on a mass scale. So they've developed their own way of being able to upscale the production, because otherwise this historical indigo dyeing would probably die out, no pun intended, because it would just be too expensive to do it the historical way for all the garments that people might want to be dyed in this manner. So they do still have the traditional hand dyeing works, and anything dyed in that process is of course going to be exponentially more expensive than something dyed on the upscale works. Yeah. Slightly off topic from Korean garb, what is the best book on the Crusades as a whole that I've read? Oh, my favorite book on the Crusades is a compilation of primary source historians called The Arab Historians of the Crusades. It's literally just called that. The Arab Historians of the Crusades. And it's fantastic because it is mostly only just primary source chroniclers eyewitnesses to the Crusades, but on the Arab side. And so it's very interesting to see history viewed firsthand and also viewed from the other side, as some people might say, the not Christian side, shall we say, the not Crusader side. Very interesting, and not necessarily what you'd always expect to read. So yeah, Arab Historians of the Crusade, my favorite book, hands down. The amount of unique things done you over there make me wish I'd never left Daegu. Daegu is amazing, and so unfortunately, your name is just a string of letters and numbers. Mr. Q Doctor RX. But Daegu and all of Korea is really evolving and growing. So the thing is that what was available to do here 10 years ago, or now wasn't available 10 years ago, because I was here 10 years ago, so I know what was available back then, and I know what's available now, and it's completely different. I have so much better access now to all of these handcrafts, to these master artisans, to museums. The cities have developed so well that it's just so much easier to access everything, whether or not you have the Korean skills. Websites are now available in English that weren't available before, and now there's, as a professional translator whose job is dead, it pains me to say this, but we now have Google Translate, right? So we now have way better, as someone, in my case specifically, who doesn't, my Korean is like 5-year-old level. So it's not up to academic text, and it's not up to your average, to a website that's about anything academic, right? I can navigate my way through food apps and Coupang and that sort of thing, but definitely I cannot navigate my way through the Korean of a research journal website. So now all these resources are out there, and the people who are now, say, in their 40s and 50s, speak English at a level where they're comfortable communicating with foreigners like me. So everything's just much more accessible now. So honestly, I don't know what your level of Korean is, or how long ago you were here in Daegu, but it might not, these things in Korea, these things might not have been available at the time. Yeah. I still need my house, ma'am. Good, I'm glad. For those of you joining, don't forget to hit that like button or double tap the screen. So this is a medieval sewing party. I am currently working on the sleeves for my new Burgundian gown. This is actually the lower half of the sleeve, and then this is the upper half. And this is how I create the really shapely, really finely shaped sleeves that you see on my so-called Burgundian gowns. I've received some admiration for the narrow cut of those sleeves, and this is how I achieve it, how that shaping, right? By having two halves of the sleeve that allow me to really get that shaping in on both sides of my arm and not just one side of my arm. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any extant Burgundian, no gowns really, from the second half of the 15th century in France or Burgundy or Flanders have survived, as far as I know. So we have no idea, no gown in this style for certain, specifically in this style. So we honestly have no idea how they might have actually achieved that fit. But my experiments tell me that if you only put one seam in the sleeve and a seam along the back instead of seam along the back and seam along the front, you're not going to get the same shaping. So to get that really fine tailoring, that sexy, curvy shaping of the arm muscles, you really do need to have two halves of the sleeve. So yeah, that's conjectural, however, and based on experimentation. So yeah, back to the indigo dyeing village that I visited in Korea. They are actually still growing their own indigo there. They have their own indigo fields. And what I learned, according to the master's son, who is himself also a master dyer and actually a biochemist, and they even have a chemistry lab on site at the dyeing works. He said that indigo dyeing reached Korea, and he's pretty certain in something like the 5th century AD, so much earlier than I thought. And he is pretty certain that the same basic techniques have been used since then. Now, he was going to put me in touch with some articles on the history of indigo dyeing in Korea, because I really want to follow up on that. But the techniques that they demonstrated, and I'll explain those in a minute, definitely strike me as 100% feasible for first millennium Korea. There is nothing in what they're doing that would be something that would have to have said been imported as a result of the Columbian exchange or have come from Western Europe or anything. So the basic process is you harvest your indigo leaves. And for those who don't know, indigo is a shrub. It's like a bush, like a low-lying shrub kind of thing. And you harvest it, and you basically take the leaves fresh, and you just smash them into a pottery dyeing vat. They use pottery dyeing vats here in Korea, which is interesting because in the West they use copper dyeing vats, right? In Europe, in medieval Europe, they're using copper dyeing vats. So here they use pottery dyeing vats, at least for the indigo dyeing. And so you smash the indigo leaves into the indigo dyeing vat. You really smash, they crush them down, they pack them in, and that's part of the process because you want the leaves to break. You want them to break. That's part of the process that will then trigger fermentation. So then you cover it in water and you let it ferment. Meanwhile, they take loads, and I do mean loads, of oyster shells. So this Master Chanhee had on his premises giant piles, snow pile, large piles of just oyster shells, and they burn them so that they crush, they turn into powder, and then they take the shell powder and they add that to the dye vat. And they also burn wood to make lye, and they make their own lye from this burnt wood, and they add that to the dye vat. Well, okay, first, First, after the leaves. So the leaves, they crush the leaves ferment. They remove the leaves. And they strain the leaves out. And then they add these burnt shells, which have lots of calcium in them, and maybe some, I wasn't able to get a clear answer on the function of the calcium of the shells. I'm wondering if it doesn't add a natural mordant to the bath, because I wonder if the calcium acts as a mordant for the dye. So I'm still waiting on an answer. I've reached out to the master's son, who's a very good English speaker, and we're chatting about this. So I'm going to get some more details about the function of the ground oyster shells, because at the time it was sort of unclear. Then they add the potash, which is the ashes from the burnt wood, which is basic. It's lye, basically. Well, they actually rinse the potash to make a lye solution, and then they add the lye solution, not the ash, into the dye vat, because they don't want the ash in there. They want the lye from the rinsed ash in the dye vat, and that makes it basic. And they try to make, their goal is for a pH of 11. Now, now we have pH strips. How would a historical dyer, a medieval dyer, a dyer from early Joseon or Goryeo or Shilla or Paekje or Manhan have done that? Well, apparently they would just develop a feel for it. You can feel how slippery the liquid is, and there's a specific slip about the liquid that will tell you that it's basic enough, not too basic, not too acidic, right? So that's how a medieval dyer would have done it. Now we have pH strips. So, but the goal is pH of 11. The vat should be heated up to 30 degrees centigrade, so that's about 90, 92, 93 degrees Fahrenheit, and it should be maintained at that temperature, so 30 degrees, not more, not less, ideally. He said you can get away with 30 to 35. He said any more than that, and you're going to get a different color. You're not going to get blue, you're going to get purple, and not necessarily purple you want. So very important to maintain that temperature, and it should be a constant temperature. It should not be a temperature that is very sudden, with intense heat on the bottom of the pot and less heat on the top. So they have to keep these pots warm. They heat them up, and then they insulate them. They literally wrap them in boryo, in ibul and boryo, in these what most people wouldn't recognize now as mattresses, but basically old school mattresses and duvets to insulate them. and then the, you know, your yarn or fabric goes into that. So that's, I learned so much about indigo dyeing. I really had no idea before I went on this tour of this beautiful, beautiful village last week. And I found out that they offer a year-long hands-on indigo dyeing workshop where you learn hands-on all the steps from very basic beginner all the way to advanced, one Saturday every 2 weeks, and I'm going to be taking part in that class. And I'm going to ask for permission to live stream at least parts of it if possible. We'll find out. That starts in March, so I'm very excited to learn how to do historical Korean indigo dyeing firsthand. Very excited. I will tell you, smell is not great. But I've done medieval dyeing before with cochineal and with madder root and with weld and with woad, and I will tell you that none of it smells good. It just doesn't. It's not. There's worse smells in the world, but it's not one that you'd want to court or fill your home with for certain. Okay, let me just screen back through the comments. So for those who are not familiar, I like to finish my train of thought and then go back and check through the comments. So let me just do that. Let me see. Well, no, the potassium, right. So Jamesy, the potassium comes from the potash, but not from the calcium, not from the shells. So the potash comes from burning the wood. That's what the lye solution comes from that. But the shells are added whole, crushed into the dye vat, and I still need to figure out what that's about. Let me see. Martín, bienvenido. ¿Es muy tarde o muy temprano allí en México? Dime. Jen Connie says, this is so fascinating. Do you find hand stitching more soothing and satisfying compared to machine stitching? Jen Connie, 100%. I love hand sewing. It is much more relaxing. I have much more control over everything when I'm hand sewing. It's more like an art to me anyway. I feel like it's more artistic when I hand sew. It's more like painting with a needle. I guess I would put it that way. Yeah, I definitely prefer hand sewing. That being said, I am going to have to be doing the long seams. And actually, I was even going to do this by machine, but this is the only hand project I have that's portable right now, so I'm going to go ahead and hand sew this sleeve anyway. All of the long seams on this new gown will be done by machine because I really need to up my output on my medieval clothing. I'm literally wearing through my medieval wardrobe, and so by my 2-week event in July, August of this year, I need to have at least 4 or 5 new gowns because that's how worn out my old gowns are. Yeah. Oh, Martín, adios. Let me see, Jamesy says a lot of those techniques were like recipes that people used up until 1900. Jamesy, 100%. 100%. The techniques of indigo dyeing that I just described, yep, basically until they started extracting synthetic dye stuffs in the 19th century, these techniques were pretty much used. And the indigo works that I visited in Naju last week, they have managed, as I said earlier, they have ascertained a method, they've devised a method of upscaling it. There's still a lot of handwork involved. Some of it still has to be somewhat small scale, especially with their facilities, in order to maintain the natural aspect of the dye stuff rather than using the synthetic dye stuff. But they have managed to upscale it, so it's on a larger scale than it was before. Learning how to make indigo sounds really cool. I'm sure it will be lots of hard work though. So here's the thing, Jen Connie, I love hard work. I grew up working in a horse stable, like literally from the age of 10 till the age of 18. I worked in a horse stable every day. Even days I went to medieval events, I got up butt early, went to the stable, took care of the horses, did the stalls, and then went to the event. So yeah, I love physical labor. It's satisfying, it's gratifying. You have an actual tangible product at the end of the day, right? And like I said, that's not a position of privilege. That was my job for 8 years. I horse shit, horse piss, animals, all kinds of animals, dead, alive. I did it all. I stuck my hands in, so I'm not bothered by anything really. And I just appreciate the physicality of hard work. I really do. And I appreciate the tangibility of hard work. I think that's something that we've lost in a lot of cases in the modern work environment. We don't have a tangible product, something we can touch that shows us that allows us to viscerally and physically feel our productivity. And I think that's a little soul stealing, or a lot soul stealing for a lot of people. I apparently did not bring my snips, so I'm going to do something that you all should never do, and that is use my teeth to cut this thread. Do not use your teeth to cut thread. It is bad for your teeth. You will cut a groove in your teeth eventually, and that's not good. Shh, don't tell anyone. Just did that. Yeah. Okay, wait. Will the Indigo classes interfere with Penzic? Well, for the Indigo classes that might happen while I'm at Penzic, I'll just miss them. Thankfully, the Indigo classes seem to come in like, there's like 3 sessions, 3 separate groups. So maybe I'll only get group 1 and 2, or maybe there'll be a break over the summer. I kind of hope there'll be a break over the summer, because honestly, Naju in July and August is pretty horrible, and this is something you do outside, not inside. So it might be that they take a break over the hottest, most intense parts of the summer. I hope anyway. Let me see. Jamesy says, okay, different properties. Yeah, Jamesy says in response to my comment about physical labor, it nurtures the inner self. We aren't made for comfort. No, we really, you know what, Jamesy, I agree with that. And I think that's why a lot of people who have very cushy, posh lives degenerate. And I don't mean that in a moral degeneration, although maybe there's moral degeneration too. I mean that like their souls degenerate. They become depressed, they become anxious, they start utilizing chemical substances to alter their mood. No, I agree with that. You know, protracted, now, everyone needs a break, and everyone needs some periods of relaxation and comfort. Don't get me wrong. We need to have some balance in our lives, but we are not balanced if all we do is sit comfortably on our asses all day, you know, cushioned, pampered, and taken care of the entire time. Yes, and remember, I love taking cruises because during that time I'm pampered and taken care of. But I also then dance 4 hours a day to get some physical activity in. But, you know, I could see that if I did nothing but live on a cruise ship, for instance, I could feel myself probably starting to degenerate if I weren't also doing all this content work that I also do while we're on a cruise ship. But yeah, the physical labor, it does, I really feel, especially if you're out in the fresh air. If you're out in the fresh air now, you know, if you're working in a mine, that is not what I'm talking about, right? That's horrible. No humans should work in mines. You know, there's plenty of jobs that are physical that aren't good for people either. So I'm not saying that all physical labor is beneficial to the human body, but there are plenty of forms of physical labor that are. Yeah, so indigo dyeing, right up my alley. The idea of literally taking a paddle and just beating air into a vat for 20 minutes, I love that idea. I also like making butter, for instance, in a butter churn. So, yeah. Let me see. I still snip tape with teeth. Yeah, James, shh, you shouldn't do that. Bad boy, no biscuit. Let's see. Susan, how's the finger? So the finger is, you see, it's no longer in a splint, everyone. It is healing. The doctors are happy with how it's healing. We still don't know what caused all that mess, and I don't even know if it's even gone yet, because I can't really tell with all of the angry flesh that's now there where the biopsy was. I mean, it's healing angry flesh, but it's still angry. So once that scar site completely heals and I can really get a sense of what is swelling from some kind of still inflammation, or what was swelling just from poking a hole in my skin and removing it, that might take a couple of weeks before I can really get a sense of that. So far, all of the tests on this finger came back negative, which is unfortunate because it means that we don't know what caused all of that nasty inflammation and blistering and sloughing of skin, and what might still be causing inflammation. Because when I bend it, I can still feel that there's something wrong in the joint, not in the skin. So, hey, travel, introducing us to foreign microbes. It's an adventure. So for those who are wondering what I'm doing right now, I am actually basting the 2 layers of my sleeve. So the part of the outer, it's going to shock you, but here it is. The outer part of the sleeve is that beautiful silky black wool about which I've been raving for these weeks now. And it's lined in silk. So the silk is actually on the inside. So what I'm doing right now is I'm basting together the 2 layers, the top layer and the lining together so that they will act as one. I refer to this as thread glue. And whenever you are, especially if you are hand sewing layers, you always want to baste. Thread glue, thread glue, thread glue. Always use your thread glue. When you are machine sewing, you don't necessarily have to baste because it's a different process and there's different ways of the fabric being held together. But even with a machine, if you are doing multiple layers together at once, then I definitely advise basting first to make your 2 layers, your lining and your shell one, making them one fabric instead of 2 layers, and then you can use your machine to sew it together. You'll have much better results. Now, do you have to hand baste? No, you could machine baste. Your sewing machines, modern sewing, even older ones, have a long running stitch that would function as a basting stitch. So even if I were doing this by machine, I would still baste these layers together with a long running stitch on my machine, and then I would sew it together with the upper part of the sleeve. So thread glue is your friend. You'll be much happier with the results. But yeah, I definitely enjoy the process of hand sewing. It's just very gratifying. I like the feel of the fabric in my hands. I like the control that I have over the needle. Yes, I'm a little bit of a control freak, but seriously, when you're sewing, you should be a control freak. You should not. Control is what you want when you're sewing. That is a fine attribute for any sewist to have. So the first thing I do when I'm going to baste is I pin the layers together and then I go back and baste with the thread. And then your basting stitches can be pulled out. So I always locate my basting stitches to either side, either inside or outside of where I'm actually going to be sewing, so that I can then remove my basting thread and reuse it, because I'm that kind of person. Yeah. Let me see. I never knew that term in stitching terms, only in cooking. Basting, yeah, I know. It's interesting because it's not really the same thing at all. I'm not dripping juice over my fabric to keep it moist and tasty as it's cooking, right? Yeah. I didn't think about that until just now, Jamesy. Yeah, exactly. You learn something new every day. It's really true. That's actually the whole point of my life for me, is learning something new every day and learning something's new, ideally. I never understand these novels that present immortals as suffering from a perpetual and terminal form of ennui, like Anne Rice's vampires. You have to be a massively incurious immortal to get bored on this planet, because there are always new skills coming up. There's new knowledge, there's new languages you can learn, there's infinite numbers of arts and crafts that you could take up and master. Like you wouldn't have to, you could spend 100 years just become a master ink maker for traditional ink calligraphy ink here in Japan, Korea, and China, right? Like I don't understand this. Oh, it's all the same. No, it's not all the same. It is not all the same. There are very vibrant and vivacious variations on a theme, but it's not all the same. So this Starbucks is now a tourist destination here because it's beautiful. Let me just show, for those of you who are just joining, this is the Starbucks in which I'm now sitting, right? So it is the most beautiful Starbucks in the world. Hands down, I will fight you over that. And so it has become a tourist destination. There are actually quite a number of Chinese and Japanese tourists here. So there's actually a sign over there. This is a shoes off establishment, which is nice. Floor seating, you want it to be shoes off. You don't want people tracking dirt in. And apparently, people aren't all like me, where they have really unique clothes and unique shoes. So there's a bunch of people here who all have basically the same sneakers, and they're all designer, Prada, Gucci, whatever sneakers, right? They couldn't actually be used to do any kind of sports, but they're sneakers anyway. And apparently there's been issues with people putting on other people's shoes, not on purpose, not trying to steal the shoes, just accidentally putting on other people's shoes and walking away with them. So there are big signs up saying, please make sure that they're your shoes. It's kind of like at the airport, everyone has a black suitcase, right? Everyone has the same black Eastpak. Yeah, well, apparently here in Korea, everyone has the same Gucci sneakers. Right, okay, so let me show you what the basted sleeve looks like. And see, even just the basting stitches just make me happy. They're uneven and wonky and whatever, but there's just something gratifying about that. The other nice thing about basting your fabric together with thread is that you can remove the pins and they won't stick you and fall out and become otherwise annoying. Also, I apologize. Is it really loud for you guys? I apologize if it is. We just had an excited group of tourists come in. Yeah, I know Jamesy, right? Oh, Lord is right. Yeah. So is anyone working on any projects of their own today? And so just to be clear, this is, what the hell? Oh, I know what happened there. This is the undersleeve, the bottom half of the sleeve. So that's going to go, that will go basically, try to do this without the top half, it's a little hard. That will be basically on the lower part of my arm like that, and will be in the lower part of my arm's eye here. And then this is the top half, right? And that will go more or less like this and connect at these two seams with the lower part. That's how I achieve that shaping you see in my beautiful Burgundian gowns. Right, okay, so now moving on to the next bit of basting. And one of the reasons that I will definitely be recovering this thread is that this is my nice fine Korean silk thread because I left the cotton thread at home. So I will absolutely not be wasting this thread. I take a very medieval attitude towards materials. What can I say? Yeah, so my condottiero, some of you know, as Ryan Gifford there in the chat, he is heading up towards Incheon Airport, and he's going to be taking a flight on Hawaiian Airlines nonstop from Incheon to Seattle to SeaTac. And this is a new route that Hawaiian Airlines just started offering as part of their merger with Alaska Airlines. So I'm very excited to hear what that route is like. Before, if you flew Hawaiian Air from the West Coast to Korea, you had to stop in Honolulu, right? But why do that if you don't have to? So now there's a nonstop flight. Now I've heard some really epic things about Hawaiian Air's service, and so I'll be very excited to hear from my man on the street, as it were, exactly how it is. So yeah. They actually offered as one of the pre-orders, there was a special traditional gourmet Hawaiian meal. So I'll be very interested to see what that is all about. As you all know, part of my love of history and creativity is cooking. And I know I didn't do the cooking show last night, guys. I'm sorry. I was just burnt out after yesterday's live stream in a good way. No, totally in a good way. I've missed live streaming with you all. Really, I have. But I just couldn't find the energy to do another 4-hour cooking marathon live stream. The other thing is I have all this lamb in my fridge that I still have to use, and I was looking for appropriate medieval lamb recipes to use it up. And I found one, but it wasn't as interesting as I wanted to be. I was actually hoping to find a lamb pie recipe. Because I love meat pies. I love meat pies, I love meat pies, I love meat pies. And I wanted to show you all the origin of the mincemeat pie. But I wasn't able to actually find a pie recipe. I haven't looked through all my sources, but haven't yet found a medieval pie recipe that is specifically calls for mutton. I know there is one out there, I just have to find it. If I don't actually find one though, I might take you all through this is possibly how a medieval cook would have done it. They have mutton that they need to use. They've got spices. They have dried fruit. They want to make a pie. Here is how it goes, and show you what it's like to cook medievally without a recipe, but with all the kind of knowledge and experience I have with medieval cooking. So we might do it that way too. So it wouldn't be so much redacting a recipe as applying a series of medieval culinary concepts. So if that interests you for our next medieval cooking session, which will probably be this afternoon, evening my time, let me later this afternoon, evening my time, let me know if that sounds appealing. Because one of my goals here is to try to connect these medieval dishes as much to the current season as possible. And it's now the Christmas season, and one of those traditional holiday pies is mincemeat pie. But of course, most mincemeat pies that especially Americans would have don't have meat in them. If you're lucky, they might have lard in them. By lucky, I mean if they're authentic. And some of you might say if you're lucky, they might have lard. Yeah, because originally mincemeat pie was not a sweet pie. It was a meat pie, hence mincemeat, that had dried fruit in it and spices. And it was not a dessert. It was a meal. It was a tasty, tasty meal. Because especially getting into this season, you no longer have fresh fruit, but you've got dried fruit. If you are in a household that can afford dried fruit, of course, and spices. And, this is the season when they would actually slaughter animals who were either too old to make it through the winter or who were in excess of what they could support alive, right? So this is why at Christmas you can have these big feasts, because it is also the natural time of year when farmers would actually slaughter the excess of their stock. And then you would have the meat available. They would store the meat in various ways. Maybe they could salt the meat. We know salting meat was a big medieval practice. They would literally take barrels of salt and put the meat in the barrels of salt. Like it would be packed layer by layer with salt and meat. And there are recipes that actually let us know that this was a practice, because they say if you're using salted meat, you need to boil it first to get all the salt out. So yeah, mincemeat for the win. So yeah, I even if I can't find an appropriate medieval mutton mincemeat recipe, then I might just take one that's for beef, or just show you what I understand about these medieval culinary practices and apply it to a on-the-fly recipe. But I also found an interesting lamb recipe that was a stir fry, basically. And this is really fascinating because there aren't many stir fry, like almost none that I've encountered from medieval European sources. And this one was for mutton, and it involves spices, but it also involved carrots and onions being part of the stir fry. You have to understand how rare it is to find a medieval recipe in a medieval cookbook that actually includes vegetables other than onions in the recipe. So involving carrots in a stir-fried and not a boiled form, not in a pottage. Completely different recipe for me. And it was an Italian recipe, no less. So isn't that interesting? An Italian recipe for a stir-fry, basically, a saute involving lamb and carrot and spices. So I might make that too, because I actually do have carrot that I need to use in my fridge, in my larder, as it would be called, and I've got that mutton, and I've got enough mutton that I can do a stir fry, and I can do a pie. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I missed some comments. Sorry everyone. Okay, so just so everyone knows, the format is I like to finish a train of thought and then get back to the comments. So I'm gonna scroll back now and see what I've missed. I apologize, everyone. Stephen, what type of thread would you use for repairing fire-resistant clothing? I work commercial construction around petroleum stations often. Oh, do not use petrochemicals. Don't use polyester. Polyester is highly flammable. So there's a whole bunch of synthetics that are made from petroleum, and you don't want those if you're operating near flames or sparks or anything like that. So yeah, I would use cotton or silk. Honestly, yeah, you want something that's going to resist the urge to catch on fire, that's not going to catch on fire and burn at 1,000 degrees. Yeah. Ooh, Brian hit the snow line. I envy you. The clothing is expensive, but doesn't sew well, and it gets expensive buying it. Fuel on the clothing degrade. Yeah. So Stephen, my suggestion would be not petrochemicals. So it's not synthetics. cotton or silk is what I would recommend. And I'd go for a thick thread, especially if it's heavy duty garments. So I would go for maybe even, I would look, you know what, maybe jeans thread might be your baby, depending on how heavy the fabric is. So Jamesy says, sounds expensive in those times. Yeah, I'm pretty certain that, there's some interesting things I've learned in the last couple of weeks, doing some more reading on papers published by a variety of scholars out there, is that in the Middle Ages, peasants had much more access, lower classes, peasants, including poor people even, the working classes definitely, had much greater access to meat than people in the 19th century did. So the average meat consumption, beef specifically, has been calculated at about 100 kilograms a year per person, not nobility, excluding nobility, right? By the 19th century, it's 19 kilograms a year. So apparently there was a much the standard of living was just higher for everyone, right? Typical thing, the Middle Ages was not the era of massive poverty that people think it was. The industrial era is. And so, the thing that would have been expensive about the pie I'm talking about, this mincemeat pie, would be the dried fruit. If the fruit is exotic in any way. So things like raisins, I'm not certain how much of a native grape industry medieval England had, for instance. But if you're down in the Mediterranean, raisins all over the place, right? You've got grapes, vineyards everywhere. So probably raisins would not have been such a luxury. Raisins of Corinth might have been. Currant raisins, not the same as Johannisbeeren, currants. Because hypothetically by that name, they might have to come from an island somewhere in the Peloponnese, right? But other kinds of fruits like dried apricots would have probably been more of an exotic purchase. Dates and figs in Northern Europe would have definitely been an exotic addition to a pie. But on the Mediterranean, figs are literally weeds and they grow everywhere. So, someone in Spain having a mincemeat pie with figs in it and dates in it, not so exotic. So, you have to take regionality into account. This is why I'm always saying you can't really view Europe, you can't and you shouldn't view Europe as a monolith, because it wasn't. The on-the-ground realities about what counted as local and cheap varied highly from region to region and season to season also. Yeah, and the spices certainly would have been expensive. Just I won't lie to you, but by the same token, it doesn't take much of a spice. Like a little bit of ginger goes a long way, So, and the dried spices last for a long time, and they would have purchased them whole. So it would be possible for even peasants to have a nice little. Peasants who have a decent crop output anyway could afford a small spice cabinet. Now granted, they wouldn't have used those spices every day in pottages, they would have used herbs in the pottages, but they would have saved those spices for like Christmas feasts. So yes, it would have been expensive, but it wouldn't have been beyond the pale of cost, depending on the spice. Stephen says, that makes sense since I just need to get better at sewing. How about doing whole patches, Miss Sewita Bar? Stephen, you are not bothering me at all. In fact, I have demonstrated how to do patches. One of my earlier sewing streams, my earlier medieval sewing parties from earlier this year, I actually demonstrated multiple times how to do patches because I have to patch my garments all the time. I don't have anything with me right here that I can demonstrate patching with. But Stephen, I think maybe if you do a search on the channel, on the live stream specifically, and you look up the word patch, you might come across it might show you the live streams where I do demonstrate how to do a patch. I'm trying to think if I've demonstrated more succinctly in any of the shorts how to do patches. I haven't, I don't think, but stay tuned. I do it back at home. I do have a couple of gowns that need patches. And so I might as well, in the next medieval sewing party, I might as well get those patches out of the way. So in my next sewing party, Stephen, if you come back, I promise I'll do a patch. At least one, probably 2 or 3. I've got a bunch of things that need patching. I do patching all the time. But basically, Stephen, the process for doing a patch is to cut a piece of fabric that is bigger than the area that needs patching, and whip stitching the patch onto your fabric. That's kind of the basic process, which I know doesn't help you if you don't know what whip stitching means. I get it. But I promise in the next medieval sewing party, I'll do some patching. It'll be medieval sewing party repair time. Yeah, you know, I have to say, one of the things that is really frustrating about, at least in the United States, I can't speak for other countries because I don't know the situation there, but in the United States, a lot of public schools have eliminated home economics. And I don't even know what they might or might not call it anymore, but home economics was basically where you learned how to do all of this, right? You learned how to sew patches, you learned how to cook, you learned how to clean, you learned the basics of taking care of yourself and your household. And unfortunately, you know, for a long time, it was only women were supposed to do that. Men went and learned to do shop. They learned to do woodworking and cars, right? Because that's manly. But really, the reality is that regardless of your gender, we all need to know all of those things. We should know the basics of woodworking. We should know the basics of car maintenance and repair. We should know the basics of sewing and cooking, all of us. And so I think it's really important that they actually return those programs to the schools. So yeah, a lot of people no longer know even the basics of sewing. And even if they have home economics, of course, the only kind of sewing they teach is usually by machine. So then no one has the basics of hand sewing anymore. And there are simply some repairs that are way easier to do by hand and way better to do by hand than by machine. Just there's no two ways about that. I'll give you an example. I have one here. So I have these wonderful vintage leather gloves. But you know, they're vintage, so the thread is a little old, it's a little worn, and the threads came out. Well, I can't find, oh, here. The threads came out. And we took them to be repaired, and all of the repairs they did by machine have all come out. All of them. Every single one of them has come out. If it had been done by hand, it wouldn't have. So, there you go. Prime example of where a hand-done repair would have been far superior. Let me see. Ryan is stepping in there. If you have, yeah, exactly. If you have older garments of the same fire-resistant material, you should keep them for patching material. Yes. So this is my general approach to garment maintenance, whether historical or modern. If you like a garment and you want to keep it around for a long time because it's expensive or you just like it, so you'll need to do repairs. You can do repairs in contrasting fabrics, but if your garment is made of a special fabric, then yeah, try to keep around older garments in the same style or with the same fabric, and then you can basically pilfer that older, more worn out garment for patches that are still in pretty good shape to use on your more recent one. This is also when I'm making new garments out of fabric. I always keep what's called the cabbage, the scraps from that. So for instance, I have collected all the scraps of the silk from this lining and the scraps, the small scraps even, from the wool, and I put those in a bag and I will label it Black Burgundian Gown, the bag, the little baggie. And then when something needs repairs here, when I have a patch, so we need a little bit of fabric for a patch, I have a bag with the fabric scraps for this exact gown ready to go in my cabbage box. I just have to dig it out, but it's labeled in its own separate baggie. So I always create a repair baggie with the littler scraps for any new garments I make. That's a tip from my sewing shop to your sewing shop. Highly recommend it. Great way to make sure you can wear these garments way past the time when maybe they should be worn. But seriously, I mean, most things, especially historical garments, no one would look askance at a garment that had been properly and neatly patched, right? And we know that even the wealthiest and most powerful, including kings and queens, sent garments for repairs. How do we know this? We know this because we have their expense accounts that include bills paid for repairs to garments. So it is an absolutely medieval practice to actually repair something poking into something weird on the seat. We actually know that even medieval kings and queens, as powerful and as wealthy they may have been, still took the time to have their garments repaired and not to donate to someone else to keep wearing them. We know, for instance, that Queen Philippa, Edward III's queen, Philippa of Hainaut, she had her gowns repeatedly rehemmed. There are expense accounts, bills that were paid for having her gowns rehemmed. And we also think because of the way, the cost that's involved, and because there's actual material that comes with this rehemming, this is why we think that even in the 14th century, gowns were being hemmed the way they are in the 15th and 16th century, which is by actually putting a band on the inside of the gown all the way around to strip all the way around that finishes the hem from the inside rather than just rolling the hem. So, yeah. Never ever let anyone think that medieval kings and queens wore a gown once and then disposed of it. That is not a medieval practice, not even for kings and queens. I have so much cabbage. Jamesy says, in ancient times, every person owned a pouch of tools in flint or bone for cutting or sewing. Yep, absolutely. And you know what, James? Even in medieval times, people carried their own spoons with them. We don't have evidence of cutlery being provided even at feasts that are, say, wedding feasts, right? The Field of the Cloth of Gold, for instance. People brought their own spoons and their own knives. And that's why we have those really awesome étui, the molded leather cases for spoons, and that's why folding spoons were invented in the Middle Ages. Literally, it's got a little hinge and it folds in half. I have one at home. Very cute. Billy and Charlie's Finest Pewterwares makes them. They are not a channel sponsor. I just love them. I love their stuff. Right. So yeah, everyone had their own spoon and they carried it with them. Everyone had a knife with them because a knife was a useful tool, not just for eating, right? And not necessarily everyone thinks, women had to carry daggers to protect themselves. Well, I mean, maybe, but also because having a knife is just useful. Okay. Let's look at what I've got going on here. Right, so all basted and now ready to sew together. But so let me show you what's happening here. A good old trusty spoon, Jamesy, exactly. Now, I have more than one good old trusty spoon. I'm gonna have to sit back a little bit. The sun is reflecting off of the floor right into my face. Sorry. God, that's bright. I might actually have to put on sunglasses. Or I don't necessarily want to aim the camera at the door that's opening and closing and everyone walking behind me, but the sun came out. Damn it. How is it supposed to be a dark, dingy medieval sewing party if the sun comes out? I mean, really? Okay, so let me bring you up to speed on what's next. So you'll see there's a slit here. Right, that's not an accident. That's not a flaw. That's a feature, because the arm's eye, the sleeve is super fitted, right? It's super fitted all the way up to my armpit, like this actually, like this not stretchy sleeve, the sleeve made of not stretchy fabric, not even a little bit stretchy, right? No stretch, will come somewhat close to having this kind of shaping, right? But how does it do that? Because then how is it actually going to fit into the arm's eye, which is also not stretchy, it's also not flexible or elastic in any way? That is because on the bottom of the arm's eye, just so everyone's clear, this is the arm's eye, this whole arm's eye, right? This hole through which your arm emerges from your garment, to which the point at which your sleeve attaches to the bodice. It's called an arm's eye, right? So on the bottom, there's actually a slit that's made, and then we insert a little, what's called a gusset there. And that gusset allows it to actually open and fit into the curve of my armpit comfortably so that I still have a relative range of motion. So it can be a little tricky though to insert a triangular shape into a slit. There's some techniques here. There's some tricks to doing so. And I'm thinking, because this is black on black and it's not going to be very visible in this light, I'm thinking of actually doing a short on how to do this to demonstrate the process, because I know many of you, have any of you out there had issues with gores or gussets, the triangular kind that insert into a straight slit like this, right? Yeah. If you haven't, then you're some kind of wizard or goddess or god of sewing, because I definitely did at the beginning of my journey. So I figured some shit out along the way. And now I'll share some of those tricks with you. But I think I'm going to do a short video to demonstrate the process, because I don't think I'll be able to show it very well here. Yeah, you can sort of see black on black, I guess. But for those who might be curious right now, the basic process is that this triangle, you can't just line up the edges perfectly like that, because if you do that, then you're going to have this weird shape when you try to attach it to the other side. So you actually angle the triangle, the gusset, this way, so that it sticks out at the bottom, at the base of the slit, and gets closer and closer and closer to the actual edge of your slit as you go up. And then you have just the tiniest, you catch just the tiniest bit of the bottom of the slit and attach it to that triangle. And that allows the triangle to insert and lay flat. And if you haven't done this, if you haven't tried and succeeded or failed at doing this, then those words mean nothing to you. And I'll just move on and sew and talk about some other things. But that's, for those of you who do know what I'm talking about, that's basically how you successfully insert a gore. Oh, Muzik, you're back. Good to see you again. Thank you for joining us again. Let me see. Jamesy says, I actually carry a fork when I go to takeaway because they only have plastic ones. Jamesy, I try to do that too. I try to carry metal cutlery with me because I don't want to contribute to the plastic waste. But you know what they're increasingly doing here in Korea, and it's fantastic? They have wood cutlery, which of course still may be wasteful to just throw it away after one use, but at least it's 100% biodegradable. And I think it's usually made from waste wood, like the offcuts that really couldn't be used for much else other than making wood chips. So, that's way better at any rate, but still, I do definitely heartily approve of taking your own cutlery with you. It's a good tip for improving sustainability. And I know people will say, well, it's just you, it's just one person. How is that going to make a dent in the environmental footprint of the population of humans? But think about 7 billion people doing that instead of taking plastic cutlery and plastic straws every time they get takeout. That'd make a dent, right? Let me see. Music for Earthworm says, my grandma has a set of cutlery and a wooden plate from when she was in Argentina in the 70s. Then it was the norm to take those when you would go to a cookout. Not sure if that's still a thing. Music, that is fascinating. What a brilliant idea. So much better than paper plates or, God forbid, styrofoam. That is really fascinating. I know that in the 70s that was not a common practice in the United States at all. Oh. Okay, so because I'm hand sewing this, I'm once more going to do some basting stitches first. To recap for those just joining us, basting in the context of sewing is not soaking your fabric in meaty, fatty juice in order to cook it. It is the process of thread gluing, of using thread. These are basting stitches, to sew 2 layers of fabric together for whatever reason. So I'm going to first, actually, going to follow my own advice. I'm going to baste my 2 layers here on this side. I'm going to baste the lining and the shell together first. So I'm just going to put this pin back. And when I am preparing the fabric for its unification, I always just lay it out and I smooth it with the grain to make sure that there's no wells or bubbles or unevenness that gets caught up in the basting, right? So that it is in fact evenly, there's even amounts on the front and the back between the lines of basting stitch, basically. And you always want to do that with the grain. So if the grain, with the grain means if your weave is like this, right? With the grain would either be in this direction or this direction. On the bias would be on this diagonal, right? If you brush your fabric on the bias, you're going to stretch it. If you brush it on the grain, you will not stretch it. It will just smooth out. So always brush your fabric on the grain, not on the bias, or you will end up crying later on because you will have created stretching and bubbles where there shouldn't be any. Yeah, so is anyone working on anything today? Let's see. Back in the midst of time at the beginning of this live stream, I was talking about historical indigo dyeing here in Korea. And at first, when I went to the dyeing place in this dyeing workshop in Naju, I was at first a little skeptical about how historical it would be because I was wondering, and Minji was also wondering this, if this was a form of indigo dyeing that had been imported by Japan during the colonial era. That happens, that happened a lot in Korea. So we were wondering if that's what we were going to see, but that is not what we saw at all. What we saw was proper vat dyeing. And according to the master that's dyeing, they're pretty certain it's a technique that's been used here since the middle of the first millennium. But they did say that the dye works in Naju were a very recent addition. That recent relative to the thousands of years of Korean history, right, since the Joseon dynasty. He said it was in the Joseon dynasty that Naju became an official dyeing workshop of the Joseon dynasty, of the royal court, basically. And that's which is actually pretty funny. And I think it probably has something to do, so the southern part of Naju's in the southwest. And it's warmer than other parts of Korea, right? And it's definitely warmer than Hanyang, which was Seoul back in the Joseon dynasty. And so I'm pretty certain that the indigo was in the south because that's where indigo grows. Indigo needs warm temperatures, and they have warm temperatures for a large portion of the year in Naju. So I suspect that's why it became the dyeing works of choice, basically, in the Joseon dynasty. And also, I did mention that dyeing is not the most sweetly perfumed activity in the world, so it also wouldn't surprise me if the king said, I want the dye works as far from Hanyang as you can get them. And they all went, well, I guess that's not you. That's me, just that a little tongue-in-cheek. It's not that bad. I've smelled worse. I've smelled way worse. At least the historical indigo dyeing in Korea didn't involve fermented urine. It just involved fermented indigo. Whereas in Europe, woad dyeing, for instance, involved fermented urine. Super yum. Okay, and so again, I'll show you, this is basted together. Now I'll baste the other side. I should have done it in the other direction and gone at both sides. You all distracted me. Stop being so interesting. Mary, welcome back. Lovely to see you again. Nolan Maxwell, George Clooney loves creative Contessa. I'll take it, sure. Oh, goodness. So I'm very excited about participating in this indigo dyeing workshop series and actually getting serious dyeing skills. I'm also excited as a chance to improve my Korean. Now, granted, I'm confident that if there's anything I don't really understand, it will be explained to me in English, but I really appreciate the opportunity for immersion and to just kind of hear Korean spoken around me all the time and learn all the terminology in Korean, right? It's the best way to learn a language is to go full immersion, so I'm all about that. I'm actually also, I would like to also start with the 5 days a week Korean classes at Gyeongbok University here, or Kaemyong University here. It's a little out of our price range right now though, because of circumstances. So I will have to wait for that, but once our financial situation is more friendly, then I do plan to start my 5 days a week Korean classes, because I do, when it comes to language learning, I do much best in a formal classroom with 4 hours a day is really how I thrive for language acquisition. I have Rosetta Stone, and honestly, it's a good tool for supplementing foreign language learning, but I wouldn't say it's good for just on its own for language learning. None of those tools are. You really, at least not for me. For me, I need that classroom environment. I really do. Do I like kimchi? I love kimchi. I love fermented vegetables. Fermented vegetables are the best. Do I like all kinds of kimchi? Because there's literally hundreds of varieties of kimchi. No, but do you like all kinds of pickles? I honestly prefer mul kimchi, not because I mind the spice of gochugaru, but because I prefer the cleaner flavor of just mul kimchi with no gochugaru in it, with no red pepper in it. And I actually have a cookbook, a recipe book at home. It's not really cooking because you don't cook, that has some very old palace kimchi recipes. So we're talking kimchi made with exotic things like jujubes and ginkgo nuts and no gochu in it whatsoever. And I keep saying I'm going to just go ahead and do that and make one of these, and I never get around to it. Maybe I'll do that as a medieval Korean cooking session. We'll make some of these old palace kimchi recipes together. One of them had like mushrooms in it, in addition to all those cool things. Yeah, I do love, and I like what's called old kimchi. I like really aged fermented kimchi. I like it to be really sour and to like tingle when you bite into it because it's so bubbly with all the fermentation. That's my favorite kind of kimchi. And I just love how happy and clean my body feels after eating fermented vegetables like kimchi, really. And not just kimchi, I love sauerkraut, raw sauerkraut. Sauerkraut, once it's been cooked, is okay, but I prefer it when it's still raw and bubbly. Yeah. Right, okay, so both sides are now basted, and one side is twice basted because it was easier to just go back than to start a new line of basting. And now we can proceed with pinning on the gusset, and then basting it before proceeding with the sewing, the actual seam. Okay. This is almost an isosceles triangle, so I had to verify which is up and which is down. Okay. So sorry everyone, I'm going to be looking down for a moment while I position this in an appropriate fashion and pin it. Oh yeah, I love ginger kombucha. I love kombucha. Love kombucha. I like kombucha that's not very sweet. So I will sometimes buy bottles of kombucha and leave them out on the counter so they keep fermenting and they keep eating through the sugars that are left, and then it gets more sour. I really like kombucha then. Yeah, I'm not, my level of sweet tolerance is not like other people's level of sweet tolerance. Kimchi or sauerkraut? I mean, which do I prefer? I like them both. They're different. I mean, they're the same. It's the same idea, right? Sauerkraut is German kimchi. Kimchi is German sauerkraut. Right? It's the same process. Kimchi is modern kimchi is just much more sophisticated or complicated to make than sauerkraut is, because sauerkraut is literally just cabbage, water, and salt. And I'm confident that kimchi used to be that a long time ago, and it's just gotten more complex over the years. In fact, it wasn't until the 19th century that gochu, that the red pepper, was added to kimchi. And it was only added to the kimchi of the lower classes because the gochugaru, which grew like a weed, by the way, and it wasn't introduced to Korea until the 18th century, retarded microbial growth, bad microbial growth. So it made kimchi even more long-lasting. And that's why it was added to the kimchi pots of the poor. But the nobles, the aristocrats, did not like gochugaru. They hated it. It was painful. It was It felt fiery and completely out of balance with the four humors. So it was not, gochu did not make it into Korean cuisine in any kind of widespread way until the 20th century. Can you imagine Korean cuisine without red pepper? Okay, so I've got this pinned now. I think I'm happy with where it will end up. I think I just have to, right. It's always a question of making sure you've got the right amount of seam allowance on either side, and I think I do. Maybe a little back, maybe. It's actually harder to do this on a smaller gore than it is on a bigger gore to get it positioned correctly. Smaller gusset, bigger gusset, depending on your language of choice. Just gonna go for it. Okay, so as I said before, first we thread baste, then we will go in and put in the final seam. Yeah, as Alpha says, chilies are New World, 100%. And there's some very weird conspiracy theories about chili peppers here in Korea and maybe in other parts of Asia as well. I'm not certain about the latter, but in Korea for certain. There are some Korean nationalists who swear left, right, and center that Korea has had the gochu, the red chili pepper, since time immemorial, that birds carried the seeds over the Pacific, or that it was parallel development, or that peppers have been here since before the last supercontinent Pangea split up. I mean, there's some crazy conspiracy theories. They really desperately have these specific people have identified their entire Korean selves based on chili peppers. But it's not true. That's crackpot conspiracy theories. And no one in mainstream academia here in Korea seriously believes that. No one. And part of the problem is that the Chinese character that was assigned to this new food is a character that had been used for other things for centuries, because Chinese characters generally aren't created out of nothing. They just take extant ones and reapply them to new concepts or new objects. So just because you see the character that is now used in the Chinese writing system for red pepper, for gochugaru or gochu, just because you find that in a manuscript from the text from the 5th century, doesn't mean that that character is referring to gochu, to red chili pepper. But that's the entire basis of their argument is on that character, which is also nonsense. It's not based on archaeology. It's not based on paleobotany. It's not based on paleobotany or anything like that. It's based on this one Chinese character. So, yeah, you fail. Let me see. Surely a good source of vitamin C. Yeah, no, I mean, chili peppers are absolutely a good source of vitamin C. They've got lots of good things in them. But the reality is that the aristocrats especially were like, oh my God, this hurts. Why would you eat this? What are you doing? Yeah, and then Alpha says, similar to the word corn, or asks, is it similar to the word corn? Yes, exactly. It's exactly like the word corn. Where the word corn in Old English and Middle English and, meant grain. It just meant grain. That's all it meant. It could be any kind of grain. It just meant grain. And in all Germanic languages, it just meant grain. And then, when this new corn from the New World arrived, suddenly everyone was like, well, this is also corn. And somehow it went from being maize to being corn in American English. And I'm not certain exactly when that happened, that part of the etymology happened, but it did at some point. Because in England, they still call it maize. They generally don't call it corn, right? But yeah, just because you see the word corn in a medieval recipe, it definitely does not mean it's maize at all. Okay, once again, I have failed to bring snips. And so you will see me doing things I recommend no sewists to do. I will be cutting thread with my teeth. Don't do that. It's bad for your teeth. No. So is anyone working on anything fun out there? Also, if you're just joining this stream, welcome to Medieval Sewing Party with the Creative Contessa. I'm the Creative Contessa. I'm normally wearing medieval kit, but I'm not today. Sorry, I wasn't thinking clearly when I got dressed this morning. I could have just as easily put on medieval kit, but I didn't. We are at a beautiful historical, or a Starbucks in a gorgeous reconstructed historical building here in Daegu. Isn't that gorgeous? This is where we are. This is my view aside from you all. Right. And I am working on a 15th century gown for myself, known in modern costuming circles as a Burgundian gown. I don't know why that keeps slipping off. As a Burgundian gown. And even though it was never called that in the Middle Ages, it was just called a guna or gauna or robe in French. And as always, the whole purpose of this live stream is for me to work on sewing or medieval crafting and share knowledge, my learnings about medieval material culture, chat about adventures, discuss philosophy. It's kind of like a history lesson, the way history should always be taught, but never is. So if you have any questions about medieval material culture, medieval history, Korean to European, I have a strong grounding in culinary arts also, and I travel a lot. I travel the world extensively. I also have a travel channel, Travels with the Creative Contessa. If you want to check out my adventures, my travel adventures, then feel free to check that out later, not now. Let me see, it bugs you about not knowing. Yes, it does bug me. Not knowing things bugs me. It always bugs me. It always bugs me. It's very hard to not know things. Okay, let's see, I guess I'm gonna start this at the base. So is anyone else working on any creative projects? Has anyone been doing any interesting research lately? Some of you know, but I'll say it again for those who don't. I have commenced a journey, a wonderful, beautiful journey with a professional, a world-renowned historian of Korean fashion, Dr. Min-ji Kim, one of the authors of a Korea Address History. And on Tuesday, we are heading to the Daegu National Museum, which is the local museum here. And I'm going to be examining in person extant garments from the 16th century. These are all women's garments on Tuesday. I'm going to be looking at them specifically to figure out how they're put together, the stitches that are used, which layers come first, the techniques. I'm going to be taking copious notes and copious pictures and video footage, and I'm very excited about what it is I'm going to learn from this process. And my ultimate goal in this research is to start accurately reproducing and recreating 16th century Korean garments. Now, you might ask me, why 16th century? Why not 15th century? Because there are no extant garments that I know of from the 15th century, unfortunately. For whatever reason, the tombs that have been excavated are 16th century or later, or so that we just don't, there seems to be, anyway, as far as I've been able to find, no extant 15th century garments. There's like one extant garment that I know of, two extant garments that I know of from the 14th century. They're men's garments. And then before that, it's tiny, tiny scraps of fabric, and I mean like this. So that is why I will be focusing for now my efforts on these 16th century garments, because that's the earliest that we have complete sets of clothing for. But still, it's pretty damn impressive that they have lots, and I mean lots, thousands of extant garments from the 16th and 17th century. How crazy is that? Well-preserved ones, no less. Not eaten up by dead body juices like the Farsetto of Diego di Cavanaglia. I mean, in really good shape. And we learned why at a museum last week when I did a live stream from that museum tour. If you're interested, the museum, the special exhibition in Naju on the grave garments of that Joseon general. And what we learned is that the burial practices in Joseon involved basically dressing the body, the corpse, in a complete set of clothing that represented their heyday. So if they were an elderly person and their elderly years were not their heyday, they would dress them in the clothes of their youth. And then they would take all the rest of their clothes, or many of the rest of their garments, and stuff them in the coffin around the body. And then if there was space left, friends and family would donate more clothes to be stuffed into the coffin with them. And then if there was more space, they would take just fabric and stuff that into any of the extra spaces. So the point is they were packaging this corpse for the ultimate ride to the afterlife. And there was almost no oxygen, therefore, in the coffin. And so the bodies they're finding are often in a wet mummy state, and they haven't really decomposed, and the garments are really well preserved because of this beautiful anaerobic environment, right? So that is why so many of these garments have survived. Now, why was that happening in the 15th century? I'm not certain that it wasn't. My suspicion is that just the graves, the tombs they've been opening have just not happened to be 15th century. So the reason that tombs get open, because I know some of you are going to talk about, oh, tomb raiders, grave robbers. No, what's happening is Korea is a tiny country with 60 million people, and 70% of the land is mountains. And so they're having to use every square inch of developable land they can just to accommodate their population. So when they build a highway, for instance, they are invariably going to run into tombs. It's just going to happen because people have been here for millennia burying each other in the ground. So they're going to run across tombs, and they're not going to not build a highway just because they encounter a tomb. That means there would be no highways in Korea, and that's not tenable in the modern world. So they do a nice respectful excavation. They actually, in collaboration with the family members or the descendants of the clan, because they can nearly always find descendants. The records here in Korea going back centuries are amazing, and so they can nearly always find the descendants. And they get permission from the descendants to do a proper excavation, and then they find out from the descendants what they would like done with the remains and with the garments. And very often the descendants say, please rebury the body, but please take those garments so that we have a record of our cultural and historical heritage, right? And I'm pretty certain that if I were a noble person from the 16th century and I discovered that centuries later, people would remember my name because my garments are in a museum, I would want that. That's the kind of immortality that most people historically have craved, right? To be remembered by future generations, right? And in a positive light, not in a negative light. So, yeah. Let me see, Carrot says that's such an incredible opportunity to examine 16th century garments, their fabrics, techniques, etc. I will tell you, Carrot, when I got the news from Minji that they had approved my visit, I literally cried. I was so happy. I was so happy and so excited. I actually cried. It was a beautiful moment. It really was. Dream come true. Seriously, this is a real dream come true for me. So, and Minji and I are going to be co-authoring a paper with the results. We're going to be, she's going to be able to provide the documentary side, because a lot of the documents about relevant to historical medieval garments, they're not even in Korean, they're in Chinese. I mean, they're in Chinese characters, which I can read like 5 Chinese characters. And I don't know if I have time to become proficient in the Chinese writing system used for Korean. So, but she already has all this knowledge, right? She knows about the sumptuary laws and the dress codes, and she knows about the wills and inventories and all those kinds of documents. So we're going to be putting together a paper in English, or a series of papers, the goal of which is to spread knowledge about historical Korean fashion to an English or a non-Korean speaking audience, and to make these resources available. And so I want the paper to include discussions, in-depth details about dress codes across various eras. Who got to wear what? Who was allowed to wear what? Who was required to wear what? Did colors have significance? Fabrics, like the language. I'd also like a section on the language of fashion in Korean, right? So I'm very excited about this paper. And Minji is very impressed with the depth of my knowledge in general about fashion history, and the depth that I would like my knowledge to be about Korean history, fashion history. So, yeah, she's really nice. She's a wonderful person. If any of you have seen any of Dr. Minji Kim's presentations on clothing on YouTube or the Korea Society, she is just as nice as she seems there. She's really nice, and she's been, even though she's just now getting ready to start a new job that she just got like 2 weeks ago. She's going to be starting it at the end of January. She's still taking the time to help me fill out these applications and set up these viewings at these museums. So she's great. She's an angel. She's a wonderful person. Okay, so I'm going to do something you shouldn't do. Don't do this. Right. Okay, so now I'm going to remove. Yes, I did it on the right side. I realized I've been talking to you all so much that I might have lost track of putting the gusset on the correct side of the sleeve. I think I put it on the correct side though, so we're good. Just going to go ahead and remove the basting stitches like so. Ryan, my condottiero, notes that the Book of Graves was my favorite artifact. Yeah, so in this museum that we went to a week and a half ago, the Hwasong City Museum, we actually, part of the exhibit of this deceased general's grave goods was the grave book. What's a grave book, you might ask? Well, apparently certain Korean families, and maybe all Korean families, clans, actually maintain a detailed log where everyone in the family is buried with maps going back centuries and centuries and centuries. And so this gentleman's clan still had such a grave book, and the copy they had in the museum looked like it was from the 16th century, but was actually dated to 1932. And they actually went into this family's grave book and they identified who was in this tomb in part based on the grave map, the map of the graves of this family. She keeps having to tell people to put their shoes on the shelves because it's like cluttering the entire area over there. It's like kindergarten, man. Put your shoes where they're supposed to go. And just take a moment, everyone. If you're enjoying this, please double tap that screen to like and consider subscribing. And if you'd like to have access to extra content, extra videos, my Discord server, lots of hundreds of hours of tutorials and extra educational video footage, then consider becoming a channel member or a patron on Patreon. Back to the chat. Let me see. Carrot says, I have a background in costume history. I understand how exciting this is. Also, it is Korean clothing, total outside of my experience thus far. Can't wait to hear more about it. Yep. I'm very excited, Carrot. I'm very excited. This is, yeah, big moment for me. I'm really glad that I have such an in-depth level of knowledge and experience about European fashion history. Because it's certainly giving me a really solid frame from which to do all of this research. And I think I think Minji's a little baffled that someone with only a bachelor degree has my level of knowledge. And I don't mean that in a snobby way. It's just that's Korea, right? And that's academia, right? In general, there's a kind of an assumption that when you have lots of knowledge, you just get a degree in it, right? Why would you have lots of knowledge if it's not for academia? So, yeah, I think that has definitely impressed her. And I really love comparative history. Like, I love discussing with her, especially, I love discussing how things were done in the same period in Europe and how they were done in that same period in Korea, and finding the similarities and differences. Finding those connections is just really exciting. And the differences also, it keeps life interesting. Historically, humans kind of all encounter the same set of issues, of challenges, and sometimes they come up with the same solutions for those challenges. Sometimes they come up with completely different solutions, and both outcomes are interesting to me. Okay, so just so everyone is tracking, I have attached the gore on the one side, and now I've pinned it to the other side to baste and then sew on that side. We've got more than one needle here. I don't have to keep unthreading the needle and then rethreading it. Ta-ba-ta. Let's see, what else about the indigo dyeing? Ryan, did you think of anything I haven't mentioned about the indigo dyeing that was so fascinating? I think what's gratifying to me is that this workshop that they're doing on this historical / traditional indigo dyeing technique that it's basically a whole season, it's like spread over 6 months. They're getting people flying in from other parts of Korea for this one Saturday every 2 weeks to participate. And they're getting young people, young Koreans, and that makes me really happy because for a while there was a situation in which young Koreans weren't really interested in their own history and culture and in learning it and carrying it on. And so, 10 years ago, it was looking a little grim here for a lot of these Korean arts and crafts, like no one would want to take that up. But I'm a little bit heartened in that maybe that is changing. Okay, I'm just gonna have to pin this a little bit differently. Did I vlog the indigo dyeing? I did not, because I didn't have permission and I wasn't really certain. So when we went to this indigo dyeing village, Setgol, as it was called in the Joseon dynasty, or Tashimyeon, as it's called now, I wasn't really certain what we were going to get. We did not get to actually see anything. We were not walked through. This is not dyeing season, at least not for that workshop. So they didn't have anything. We didn't get to do it step by step with them. As I mentioned, it's actually an involved process. So I wasn't certain actually what we would be seeing, what there would be to see, what there might be to vlog. So I didn't even ask for permission. But now that I know what there is and I know basically what it's about, I will have a better, when I go back to do the workshops, I will see what I can do, whether they would let me. And they might say no, because they might consider it their proprietary process, right? Or they might say yes, because they'll know that I have a non-Korean audience, and hopefully I'll be able to spread more awareness and knowledge of the beauty of, Korean historical heritage. So we'll see. I was also there as a guest of a guest, which makes it even more complicated, in my opinion. Yep. Okay. Let's see, other interesting learnings from the indigo dyeing. The importance of keeping I've done medieval dyeing, medieval European dyeing. So I have I have a good deal of familiarity with those processes in general. Have any of you done any hand dyeing, any natural dyeing, historical or otherwise? Right. So for a lot of dye stuffs, pH and temperature are very important. And if you are in the West, in Europe, they used copper dye vats, and copper dye vats actually also contributed to the process because of the copper ions actually positively impacting the outcome of the colors. What's interesting about the indigo dyeing is they're not working with metal vats historically, they're working with giant pottery vats. So they're completely non-reactive, and that was very interesting to me, at least for the indigo dyeing. I don't know about the other historical or natural dye stuffs. Now, Minji told me that for Korea there are, indeed, some historical documents discussing the dyeing process, but she said that it's written in an archaic version of Korean, and that it's hard for even her to understand. But I'm going to see if she can maybe put me in contact with an expert on historical dye stuffs, and I can talk to them and get them maybe to contribute to the information or contribute to these papers, because for me, I want to know about all the aspects of garment production in this era. So this is definitely going to be a multidisciplinary endeavor, right? And one of the questions I'll be asking at the museum on Tuesday is going to be have they done any chemical analyses of the garments that are that have lost all of their color. Some of them might be, in fact, undyed on purpose because they were underlayers, but some of them may have been changed by the body juices. That happens. That happens a lot. Or just the conditions of the grave, whether body juices are present or not. Try not to think too hard about the body juices. So yeah, I'm going to make a concerted effort to actually come up with a list of questions so that I'm in the excitement of the moment on Tuesday morning when I'm fluttering like a schoolgirl. That I still remember all the things I need to ask and know as part of this process, and things that the museum might know that they haven't included in the written information, or that I couldn't see in the written information. Let me see. The sun is a chemical dyeing engineer looking at the process in a new way. Oh yeah. So at this indigo dyeing works, that is indeed a traditional indigo dyeing works. The sun, as Ryan was saying, the sun is a chemical engineer, professional chemical engineer, degreed in everything, a doctorate, in fact. See my earlier comment about needing a doctorate to get a little more respect from perhaps from the Korean museums. Respect is too strong a word. To not have to prove myself overly every time I want to look at a garment. Anyway, the sun is indeed a chemical engineer, and he has applied his chemical engineering expertise to this natural dyeing process in a way that has allowed them to upscale the process, so they can still do the natural dyeing, still using the techniques, the core techniques and processes, maybe processes is maybe a better word, processes of the dyeing process, but upscale it in such a way that it is viable for using on a larger scale, and therefore keeping the art alive as something that is more than a mere curiosity, but as a technique that has viability and applicability in the modern world. And I think that's great. They, as I said earlier, they do still have their traditional historical dye work set up. They still have all the vats. They still burn the oyster shells like they were burning them 1,000 years ago. They still make lye basically like they were making it 1,000 years ago. But they also now have much larger vats for mass fermentation, for instance, instead of single, a whole 50 vats lined up for fermentation, 50 of the pottery vats lined up. So it's a very interesting process. I'm very excited to really get to add a serious hard skill to my arsenal of historical craft skills. It seems redundant somehow. It's getting kind of dark in here, which is weird. It's not that late. What time is it? I've been live streaming for that long. I literally looked up to turn the lights on, and then I realized I don't have control over the lights here. And then I looked up and realized, oh, the lights are on. This isn't supposed to be a hand workshop. This is supposed to be a social place. Hold on a minute, I'm gonna share some chairs. 네. 귀엽다. 귀엽다. There's a very cute young man here. He's super adorable. And if I weren't live streaming, I would totally share my table with them, but I don't want them feeling awkward sitting on the other side of a live stream with me. Yeah, when I say young man, I mean 4, 5 maybe. Right, okay. Yesterday I had a very fun and chaotic live stream with Philip from Irish Medieval History. If you want to check that out after this, there's a recording of it where I picked up in the live stream anyway, where we just went in random directions discussing topics of medieval history based on questions and comments. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. It's good to get back into the live streaming groove. I know I've been out of it lately. First, I had to recover from the 13-hour jet lag from traveling back from the U.S. and now you've run into holiday baking season, where I end up baking my great grandmother's recipes to give to people for various charitable causes. So I've been doing a lot of baking lately. One of these recipes, I have a cookie recipe from my great times 4 grandmother, handwritten by my great grandmother. It was her great grandmother's recipe. And my great grandmother was born in 1900. And this recipe is written in this gorgeous Palmer penmanship. She wrote multiple notebooks of recipes for my father. And we have them still, thankfully. And this recipe is very interesting because it's not like any butter cookie recipe I've ever seen in my life. And I've done a lot of baking in my life. This recipe has 3 cups of flour and only 1.5 cups of sugar. And if you know anything about ratios, that's not a lot of sugar relative to the flour. It has only egg yolks. 2 of the 4 egg yolks are boiled and pressed through a sieve. Does that sound familiar to any of you who do medieval cooking? And it has butter. It has no vanilla. It does have some baking powder, but otherwise this recipe could be a medieval recipe. It really could. Everything else about it, every other thing about it could be medieval. So, and I have, in fact, it involves creaming the flour and sugar. I've done that with a spoon, just a wooden spoon. So it would be possible with medieval ingredients. So I've actually considered making it without the baking powder and seeing how it turned out, seeing what it's like. I think it'll be more like shortbread, and that might not be a bad thing. So I'm tempted to try it out as a conjectural possible like 16th century cookie recipe, because so many of the processes of making these cookies harken back to medieval recipes. The passing a boiled egg through a sieve, man, it doesn't get more medieval than that. Lalit, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for my medieval sewing party. I know I am not attired in my usual medieval garb, and that was dumb of me, but there it is. I'm now at this fantastic historical Starbucks here in Daegu. Isn't this a gorgeous building? Fantastic. I love this place so much. And I'm just getting some sewing done, some hand sewing done, while I hold forth about a variety of medieval topics. And if any of you have any questions about medieval material culture, medieval history, sewing, clothing, cooking, just drop them in the chat and I will answer them. Some of you may have seen my latest short that has gone viral. Not my latest short, but one of my latest shorts that has gone viral. My rant about medieval movies, and so I thought maybe I would talk about some of the movies that people asked me about in those comments, because of course. The short in short, this short says that I don't like Hollywood movies because medieval Hollywood movies, because the costumes are terrible. It's always muddy and dark and gray. There's no color anywhere, and medieval material culture is misrepresented in the most egregious way. So I don't enjoy that. And so some of you then came back and said, well, thank you for letting us know. Now could you tell us which of the movies you found to be good? And I had to say that in terms of Hollywood movies, I can't think of a single one where I would say, oh yeah, that was good. That represented the clothing accurately. That represented the material culture accurately. That one wasn't so dark that I wanted to commit suicide, right? And I mean that like literally dark, not a dark storyline. I mean like so dark that it just looks like the sun has never shone on medieval Europe ever. So yeah, some of you then came back and asked, well, what about this movie? What about that movie? So I thought maybe if you're interested, while I'm sitting here sewing, I'll talk about some of those movies that were discussed, which were queried in the comments. Let me see. My name is Lalit, and I have an organic shop in Chennai, India. We deal with organic products like rice, millet, oils, dried fruits. We order directly from farmers. Oh, that's lovely, Lalit. Welcome, welcome. I'm here in Korea, so we're on the same continent at least. Let me see. Nolan says, would you rather live in medieval times or now? Oh no, now. 100%. That's a good question. People ask me, would you like to travel back to the Middle Ages? No. No, I would not. Not unless with some kind of magic enchantment that would keep me safe and healthy. I mean, there are many beautiful aspects of the medieval world. Do not misunderstand me. There really are. The way that people still interact communally, that people still play games together and sing together and dance together and eat communally, live communally instead of live isolated and alone. Right? There's so many beautiful aspects to that kind of life. People are still hand making items, which means people have a connection with their consumption because they understand that what they're consuming took lots of time and effort and expense to make. There's a lot of benefits to the medieval world. Also, clocks haven't really taken over and factories haven't accelerated our life to the point of anxiety and depression. Yeah, there's some really beautiful things about medieval life. There's also a lot of horrifying and deadly things about medieval life, like the plague, like certain medical treatments and a lack of antibiotics and a lack of vaccines. So no, I would not want to go back. I'd love a time machine that would open a window and let me look into the past, see it really. But I wouldn't want to go back without that magic spell, like I said. Let me see. Shelvakbo says, would I want to live before or after the invention of toilet paper and air conditioning? Tough question. Actually, I don't like air conditioning that much. I prefer to just sweat, honestly, for the most part. I really do. I don't like going in and out of air-conditioned buildings, and usually air-conditioned buildings are just, they feel the air is stale, and I don't like it. I grew up without air conditioning in a very hot and humid place where summers were very hot and humid anyway, and so I don't mind being hot and humid. I don't really like being overly air conditioned or air conditioned at all. So, but vaccines and antibiotics are a deal breaker for me, 100%. My grandmother had polio as a little girl, and that definitely shortened her lifespan probably by 20 years. So yeah, vaccines for the win. Yep. but you know, there are a lot of beautiful things about the Middle Ages, which is why I like living now and being in an affluent enough place in my life where I can not only explore medieval material culture, but I can recreate it and have fun events where it's only the beautiful parts of the Middle Ages. That's my preferred, 100%. Do I sauna? I enjoy a sauna after a good hard workout sometimes. Yeah, I can appreciate a sauna. I don't like to sit around doing nothing for very long, so like the sauna has a time limit for me. I guess unless I could bring sewing into the sauna. I never thought about bringing sewing into the sauna. Medieval sauna sewing party. That has a certain ring to it, doesn't it? Thinky thoughts. So people asked about so let me see. Movies that people asked about in terms of their clothing. Catherine called Birdie. So I haven't actually seen the movie, but I saw stills that made me not want to see the movie, and not just for the clothing. I grew up reading Catherine called Birdie. It's probably one of the books that inspired me to love the Middle Ages. And when I saw the stills from the movie that had no bearing on the book, like there's no scene in the book that is her fighting with a sword, for instance, goose egg. And that made me go, I don't want to watch this. Why do I want to watch this? When, you know, they're making her do things that this is not appropriate. This is not from the book. I liked the book for the book. I don't need a Hollywood fantasy version of the book. And then the clothes themselves, medieval fantasy at best. Yeah, they're colorful. I will admit, at least it's bright and colorful. It's not, excuse me, there's no blue filter. I've been informed. They haven't been graded into that horrible gray and blue, right? But it's not, sorry, Catherine called Birdie, it's not accurate to any period of history. Not even any outfit is true to any given period of medieval history, fashion-wise. Sorry. Yeah, I would say I would rate that as medieval fantasy, which is maybe better than evening gowns and glamour makeup, I guess. Let me see. Shellback Bow has it. Yeah, the Contessa has married a gallant lute-playing knight. I have indeed. But the question was, would I rather marry a knight in shining armor or a king and a prince? In the Middle Ages, there was no difference. Kings and princes were knights. Now, the question should be, would you rather marry just a knight who isn't a king or a prince, or would you rather marry a knight who is a king or a prince? Depends on the court. Depending on the court, it could be fantastic to be the queen or the princess regnant. The effects, the power you would have to positively impact people's lives, the cultural benefits of that. Right? There's a lot of potential perks there. But if you're in the wrong court and the wrong era, you're just going to be constantly playing the Game of Thrones, and that doesn't sound like fun to me. Okay. I'd honestly rather be a well-to-do Contessa in a court with her own court that isn't terribly connected to any of the politics of any given era, and can just enjoy the beautiful aspect, enjoy and encourage the beautiful aspects of life for all of her people. That's an ideal. That's more my idea. I don't want to have to play all those political machinations. Ironically, my husband might actually like that because he loves playing chess, and that's all chess is. I don't hate chess, but I don't live to play chess. Okay, so you probably all won't be able to really see in this light because it's black on black, but the gusset is inserted. I'm not quite happy how it turned out on the back. It's a little uneven. I know you're never going to see the back, but whatever. So one seam allowance is bigger than the other. It's not going to make a difference ultimately. It's just that I know it's not perfectly even on both sides. But the important thing is that it is inserted, and that you can see down here that all of the fabric is caught up. That's what matters ultimately. Let me see. Robin Hood, I think, Nolan, you might have Robin Hood, Kevin Costner, maybe? Vikings or Templar, yeah. Oh, Shellback Bow, thank you. I think Ryan might actually still be there in the chat, so he should actually be able to read that comment. Are you reading Condottiero? I also miss having his strumming up, but my Condottiero is traveling to Seattle. He is bringing his lute with him, and he has promised me he is going to do live stream lute practices for you all. So I won't be there, literally, I won't be there. And I won't be in the live stream because it'll be either him or me, so it'll be him practicing. But if you're interested in watching him grow and improve and listening to his strummings, he did promise he's going to do it daily, so let's hope that's true. Yeah. Were there witches in medieval Europe? No. At least not like you're thinking. Not witches like you're thinking of. So I guess you have to define what you mean by witch. There were people who were not called witches, men and women who practiced a form of magic, using enchantments and incantations and spells, but it was a sympathetic magic that was sympathetic with Christianity. So it wasn't black magic, as some people might call it. And it was not prohibited by the church. It was not prosecuted by the church. It was not prosecuted unless it was used for evil. And then it was the question of the crime that was committed using magic, not the magic itself. So were there witches? Not like we understand. And the big witch trials, they don't start until the Reformation, and they don't really get into full swing until the 17th century, which is way past the middle. That's the modern era, everyone. So witch trials are actually a product of the modern era, not the medieval one. So yeah, there were people who practiced a form of magic, and if Nevis is out there, he would be able to chime in with much more detailed information, but there were books of spells and enchantments that were published in the Middle Age, that were written, composed, and copied and dispersed throughout medieval Europe into libraries. And they nearly always they invoke the saints, they invoke Jesus, right? And it's not about harming people, it's about helping people. These spells are about positive. So, and men and women practiced it. More often men, actually. There were court wizards, believe it or not. There were absolutely court wizards, but not witches like you might think. And were they, what kind of magic did they practice? Was it actually what say Hollywood would think of as magic? Well, I don't have any evidence of that necessarily. But it definitely wasn't the prosecutional experience that people expect now when we talk about magic in Hollywood. I want there to be witches. The last witch I met turned me into a newt. I got better. Oh yeah, I got better. Oh, Monty Python. Yeah, great movie. Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Life of Brian, though, has to be one of my favorite Monty Python movies. Seriously, Life of Brian is just chef's kiss. And it's timeless, right? Life of Brian is timeless because that kind of garbage, that kind of religious and political nuttery is timeless. And so it applies in all eras. So yeah, love the Life of Brian. Good stuff. Okay, I'm going to use my teeth again to do a thing that I shouldn't be doing. Let me see. What would you say to Il Magnifico if you could converse with him? What could I say to Lorenzo Il Magnifico? That Magnifico, right? Because Magnifico was a title that wasn't an epithet that was not only given to Lorenzo. But anyway, gosh, if I could actually have a conversation with Lorenzo, goodness, wow. I would actually be interested in hearing his philosophy about good governorship, right? Because, he was the de facto Prince of Florence. And so I would be very interested in hearing his idea, his philosophy about good governorship, and his view of the role of the prince in society, Prince capital P. I would be very interested in having that conversation with him. Let me see, I got yelled at for playing Life of Brian over the SHIP TV network on Easter Sunday. The chaplain then yelled at my division officer for turning it off. I'm sorry, I think that Life of Brian on Easter Sunday, chef's kiss. I love that so much. Brilliant move, gorgeous. And yeah, the chaplain, a good chaplain should have a good sense of humor. So my favorite priests, because I'm Catholic, my favorite priests are the ones who have hilarious senses of humor and can absolutely mock the church where it deserves to be mocked, right? That's a leader, that's someone who understands their organization and understands that life is too short to not have a sense of humor. Tornado, welcome back. Lovely to see you today. Yeah, my finger, see, no more giant thimble, as some of you called it, right? So yeah, it's healing slowly. Still don't know what was wrong with it. Still don't know what might be still wrong with it. So we're, that's a bit of a struggle. But at least the stitches have healed, and I have the use of my finger again. So that's good. Focusing on the positive here. Yeah. Do I have a phone? Amy, yes, I'm staring at the phone right now. I have several phones, actually. So yeah, medieval sewing party, if this is going to be a joke about, oh wow, I didn't know they had cameras in the Middle Ages, right, I get it. The thing that's medieval about the sewing party today is, do you need more? Yeah, so the thing that's medieval is that I'm working on a medieval sewing project. This is a sleeve for a 15th century replica, reproduction 15th century gown, for instance. And I talk about medieval history, medieval living history, medieval material culture, and creativity. So yeah, the camera is obviously not medieval, but the subject matter and the creative matter is. Yeah. Yeah, Life of Brian is great. You know, and then I'm thinking back to it. This segues into the discussion about medieval movies and accuracy. The clothing in Life of Brian is pretty good, right? Isn't that terrible? Like the clothing in sets, although the sets in Life of Brian, it was unwashed, you know, whitewashed stone or colorless marble, which of course, medieval, ancient Roman, ancient Greece, all around the Mediterranean. Color was the thing. They painted, going back well past from the ancient Egyptians all the way forward, everyone in the Mediterranean painted their homes brightly. They did not, their buildings and homes, public civic buildings, it wasn't bare white marble the way a lot of people imagine it is. So yeah, the bare white marble, not so accurate. But the clothing in Life of Brian, definitely an accurate representation. Let me see. Women have were not treated so well in the Middle Ages unless you were wealthy, and then maybe you had some autonomy. So Carrot, so I'm going to quibble with you a little bit on that, because the Middle Ages is not a monolith and Europe is not a monolith. And so depending on your specific era of the Middle Ages, women actually had more rights and more bodily autonomy then than they do in certain states in the United States right now. So, and it really depended. For instance, in medieval Ireland, women and men were pretty much on equal footing, legally speaking. They were treated very well and with great respect. In Norse society, through all of the Middle Ages, women had a great deal of autonomy and were treated pretty much the same as men by law. In say Sweden and Norway and even Denmark. So it's not monolithic across Europe. And in fact, the further south you go, the fewer rights women have. So the closer you get to the patriarchal society of the Mediterranean, which, you know, Rome was highly patriarchal, classical Greece was highly patriarchal, with the exception of Sparta, which was patriarchal but also not, weirdly. Actually, it was more matriarchal now that I think about it, because they could always know who the mother was. They didn't necessarily always know who the father was, right? So, you know, depending on where and when you are in medieval Europe, women actually may have had more autonomy and power. And the place where women definitely had autonomy and power everywhere in medieval Europe is within a monastic community, which is why a lot of women chose to join monastic communities. Because in those places, as you say, in those specific polities, in those eras, it was better for a woman to be a nun than to be a wife. Yeah, for certain. Yes, the Monty Python quotes, let them flow. Love it. Love it. Strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony. Oh, that's fantastic. Fantastic. Sir Reginald is one of my favorite ones as well. I mean, just the way those serfs hold forth is pure brilliance. Takeda, lovely to see you. Welcome back to our favorite Starbucks. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so I think the reality of women's lots in medieval Europe is not as cut and dried as we might like to think it is. In a lot of ways, the Reformation is what was the real downturn for women's rights, seriously. Because the Reformation was the most misogynistic religious movement in the history of Christianity. Those churches, oh my God, a lot of those splinter churches in Germany, there was one splinter church in the Reformation that literally forbade women from leaving the house. It didn't last very long. that the women eventually actually did rebel against it. But yeah, a lot of the misogyny that we attribute to the Middle Ages is post-medieval. Also, the laws that we attribute to a lot of the misogynistic laws that are attributed to the Middle Ages are actually, in fact, post-medieval. Yeah. But the goal was generally in medieval Europe, every woman's goal was to become a wealthy widow. That was your goal, be the widow. And there's a reason that a lot of widows didn't remarry if they didn't have to. If their husband died and left them financially secure, then they just took over his business and ran. They did not need another man and didn't want one either. Yeah. Let me see, the Reformation and then the Enlightenment. Yeah, shellback bow, exactly. Yeah, Sir Reginald, you'd never believe it, but this, and I'm not shilling for them, this is a Starbucks. I'm absolutely not shilling for Starbucks, although you know what, if I'm gonna sell out, it might as well be to Starbucks in Korea, because they have, of all of the commercial coffee houses all up and down on the entire peninsula, Starbucks in Korea has the best green tea because they actually serve top quality, organic, Jeju green tea, whole leaf. Almost all the other coffee houses serve garbage tea. They serve good coffee, but they serve garbage tea. Starbucks actually serves quality, locally grown tea. So, yeah, Shellback Bow says there were some pretty Starbucks shops in Japan too. Yeah, up in Seoul, in Bukchon Village, which is the historical residence of the aristocrats between the two palaces, Changdeokgung and Gyeongbokgung. There is the most beautiful Baskin Robbins in the world, which is also in a hanok very much like this. Okay, so I just put in some more stitches because I wasn't happy with how the V met at the bottom, and so now you can see the insertion of that gore, that gusset. Let me just finish this stitching off. If you're just joining, welcome to my medieval sewing party, and if you're enjoying it, don't forget to double tap that screen or hit the like respectively on your device. And also, if you'd like to see more, to subscribe. And everyone, I just want to remind you, the notification bell. You periodically will have to recheck your notification settings on YouTube because every time the app updates, and sometimes just because your notification settings will be reset, which means even if, let's say you, of course, choose to see everything from me, because why wouldn't you want to see everything I publish whatsoever, no matter what? So if you hit the all notifications, like last week, this week it may be set back to custom, which just means whatever the algorithm thinks you want to see. So if I'm just putting the announcement out there for all of my fellow creators, not just for my content. If you want to make sure you're notified of a creator's content, mine of course especially, then just double check your notification settings by clicking on the bell and seeing what is chosen. And if you want to know whenever I go live or publish something new, then make sure all is clicked. Otherwise, the algorithm will decide for you what you want to see. Good times we live in, huh? Yeah, so Reginald, I love this place. I love this place so much. One of my friends gave me a $100 gift certificate, 100,000 won gift certificate for Starbucks. So basically, I rent the space for, 5,000, 6,000 won, which is like $4.50, and I just come and sit here and sew and live stream. It's great. Yeah, it's really fantastic. Yeah, shellback bow. Philip and I will be doing something on Friday. Friday. Philip and I will be doing a live stream together on Friday. So Philip and I have a project brewing. I'm gonna put the word out here now, even though this isn't the official launch. How many of you would like to see Philip in 15th century clothes too? Are you, like me, tired of seeing him in his crappy t-shirt, right? I think we all are. Like, we want to see him in medieval clothes, don't we? Well, he wants to be in medieval clothes. So, but he doesn't exactly have the money. He wants me to make them for him, but he doesn't have the money to pay me to make them. So we're going to start a GoFundMe project, and it's going to be a project. It's going to be make Philip fantastic 15th century clothing like that would have been worn by a 15th century Irish nobleman, specifically Desmond Fitzgerald. And if you would like to see me make these clothes for Philip, then we'll be starting a GoFundMe, and you can contribute to the GoFundMe, and the GoFundMe will cover the cost of materials and will also cover my fees for sewing these clothes for him. So you'll be basically paying me to make Philip clothes. But we're going to be live streaming and recording the process from the skin out. So we'll start with the undershirt and the braise and the hosen and then the doublet and then a gown of whatever kind we decide to go on top of that. And it's going to be based on my research into Anglo-Irish clothing in 15th century Ireland. So if you're interested in supporting that project, stay tuned. I'm going to set up a GoFundMe, and the official launch of the project is going to be on Friday, in the sense that we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to go through some of the material, my research for Anglo-Irish clothing, which I've decided, instead of doing a finished and polished video, because honestly, finished and polished videos take a lot of effort and they don't get any push on YouTube anymore. So I'm going to do it as a live stream presentation on Friday. And so if you're interested in learning about 15th century Anglo-Irish fashion, or the fashions that are sort of continentally influenced but worn by Irishmen in Ireland in the 15th century, then that'll be Thursday night in the Americas or Friday morning in Asia. Yeah. So we'll be starting that GoFundMe, and if we get enough money, we'll actually start. We'll start with the skin out, right? We'll see what happens. First, we'll make the underwear, and then the braise, and then the shirt, and the hosen, and we'll see how much people want to see Philip actually have 15th century Irish clothing. Let me see. Should order him a gag gift set first, just for giggles. Oh, shell back bow, that's beautiful. Like one of those horrible plastic Halloween costumes, like the ones made out of God knows what petrochemicals. Oh yeah, that would be pretty funny. Oh, let me see. What if Prince Arthur had lived? What if Queen Catherine of Aragon's son survived? Oh, England still would have monasteries and care for the poor. Yeah, God, can you imagine what if Prince Arthur had become King Arthur of England? I mean, wow, what a different world we would live in. What a different world indeed. Contessa bawling. Let me see. Would I rather be a witch or a fairy? Oh, a fairy. No questions. Fairy. Fairies have immortality and are impervious to disease, and are generally beautiful and have skills and have a beautiful realm. Like, I could live my pure, beautiful, medieval, courtly life in the land of fairy, right? And never worry about catching a disease or being pillaged and burned. Yeah, that'd be great. Fairy, for certain. Way better than a witch. Would we all be speaking Spanish? Sir Reginald, that's an interesting costume. So we wouldn't be speaking Spanish if Catherine of Aragon's son had lived, because she learned English. She was speaking English in the court. I don't think we'd be speaking Spanish. Spain and England would have allied, but it wouldn't mean we'd be speaking Spanish, I don't think. The English weren't like that. Here's a thought. Maybe Spain would be speaking English, because the Habsburgs failed on a genetic level, and if Catherine's son had lived, then the kings of England would have been in line for the Spanish throne. There's a thought. Oh my God, yeah. Amy asked, do I know about the Titanic? I do know a lot about the Titanic. I cruise rather a lot on a cruise line that has ships that are designed in a certain way to capture the vintage look and feel of ships like the Titanic. And actually, the Cunard line was one of the cruise lines that was the cruise line that sent the Carpathia to rescue the survivors of the Titanic. And so if you cruise on Cunard, especially if you go on a transatlantic voyage, usually transatlantic crossings float over the graveyard of the Titanic. And nearly always there is a moment of silence where we pass over that part of the Atlantic. It's a pretty moving and pretty impactful moment. There's also, in the stairwells of certain Cunard ships, there's also history about the rescue of the Titanic with photographs and primary source accounts. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Oof. It would be Spanglish. Yeah, made by the White Star Line. Yep. And eventually the White Star Line and Cunard merged after the Titanic. Yep. Okay, so here we have a little triangle all inserted. So the next thing to do here is to iron this out, iron it flat. And I need better light for this because it's black on black on black. And I'm trying to see if if I actually in fact captured everything I needed to capture. And so then we'll iron it once I get into good lighting to be able to check that. I will iron this flat. You can't see it's black on black on black. You can't see it. And then I will whip stitch these edges down flat so that it lays nice and flat. And then we will attach the sleeve. So I want my order of operations is whenever I have little gores like this that need to go into part of a garment, I insert the gusset first, finish everything, and then I will sew these 2 layers together. I don't know where the other sleeve went. Oh dear, it's all mushed up here, right? And then I will sew these 2 halves together. Why do I do that? Well, we actually know that that is a medieval method of creating garments, of finishing each piece separately and then attaching them, because the few extant garments we have, I mean, from say the 15th century, show signs of that. So for instance, I was just re-examining the conservation report and the photos from the Farsetto doublet of Pandolfo III Malatesta. He died in 1427, and they think his farsetto was made not long before that. You know, it doesn't, other than the rotting from the body juices, it doesn't show a lot of signs of wear, actual wear. So I was examining that conservation report, and what it says is that the pieces, each panel was completely sewn together, padded, and the edges were finished, and then they were attached. And you can actually see that in this case, the layers were actually folded in, the shell and lining and interlining and padding on the inside. The edges were folded in like this, and it was whip stitched. And then those whip stitched edges were whip stitched together, creating a very fine flat joint. Now, not all garments are like that. The farsetto of Diego de Cavanilla, it was padded separately, but the edges, there was seam allowance left, and then those were sewn together with a back stitch. But still, what this shows us is that the medieval technique is that any finishing that needs to happen, any padding, any quilting, that should happen in individual pieces, which makes sense. It's much easier to work with an individual piece than with a bulky whole thing that whose edges or whatnot you're trying to finish. And then we sew it together. So my first goal here is going to be to iron this flat and then to whip stitch the edges. Now, in the 15th century, that's about the time when they start getting hot irons. As far as we can tell, it's like 14th, 15th century is the earliest evidence I have of irons in Europe, in this part of the world. But we do have glass smoothers, which work very well at pressing things like this open. I did not bring my glass smoother here because it weighs a lot and it's glass. Even though it's, really sturdy, there's no point in tempting fate. Lots of concrete around here. So I don't necessarily need an iron with heat to open this up. I have, however, also found a reference to glass smoothers being heated and then used to flatten garments. And so if any of you know anything about heating up glass in a safe way, please let me know. I reached out to Historic Glassworks to ask them about heating up this glass smoother, and I never got a response from them. And I clearly, for reasons that should be obvious, I don't just want to pop it in my oven at 200 degrees and hope that it heats up and doesn't shatter or something, right? So the question is, how was it heated up? But it would make sense to me that the glass smoother heated up would be more effective at smoothing fabric and polishing fabric than a cold glass stone. So yeah, if you have any ideas about heating up basically a glass disc with a glass handle, blown glass, a blob of glass, a blob of glass handle, safely heating it up enough that it actually makes a difference in flattening fabric, let me know. I'm curious to know, but for reasons, I don't want to just experiment with it. Yeah. Suggestion is maybe in hot water. Yeah, I just, now that you said that, yeah, maybe in hot water, like maybe that would be enough to gradually and gently heat it up. You're right, that maybe, that's an idea. And that will definitely not be at a temperature that has a max temperature, right? You can only, as long as you don't add stuff to the water to raise its boiling point, that has a maximum temperature. It would be very even, and hypothetically, that should be fine. Right, that shouldn't affect glass. I don't think 200 degrees Fahrenheit, 210 degrees Fahrenheit, or 100 degrees centigrade. I don't think that would affect the glass in a deleterious manner. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and as Sir Reginald says, it's also a relatively common and safe heat source in any given home, right? Anyone who has any peasant, for instance, could bring a pot of water to boil and put something in it. So yeah. Also, as a likely technique that would have been available to a medieval person. Yeah, you're right. Why didn't I think of the water? Actually, I hadn't given it much thought until now. I was just waiting to hear back from the experts. So thank you for the ideas, everyone. I love that we have this. You know, you guys really do help me think about things. Like, we ping off of each other, and I really appreciate that about this community. Really, you guys are great. I really love this. I love live streaming with you all because you make it fun for me. And you actually always inspire me with new ideas and new thoughts and your own philosophies and your own ideas about history. So yeah, I'd just like to take this moment to thank you all for being part of this experience, because hopefully if you're watching, you're enjoying it, but I definitely enjoy it as well. I walk away from these sessions energized and also hungry, so I'll probably be eating something on the way home. Okay, so basically, after flattening it out, maybe with my smoother, and maybe I'll live stream that so you can see the smoother in action. I've been promising that, and I think I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do a session where I actually show you how to use the glass smoother and how to use it to polish linen, because that was one of its applications, was linen polishing. And the reason you would want to polish your linen is because it's smooth, it compacts the fibers of the linen, and it makes the fabric stronger, but it also polishes it so that it gets this amazing sheen, right? So yeah, I did promise you I'd show you what that process is like we'll do before and after. So you can see, this is the unpolished linen, this is the polished linen, and polished linen it's amazing, it really is. So after we open that up, I will then tack those stitches down. I will then line up the two halves, more or less like that, and I'll baste them together. And then we will do a running stitch, a long running stitch with the occasional back stitch on both sides. And for finishing this gusset, I'm not going to turn the edges of this wool. I'm just going to whip stitch the wool down to the silk. Why? Because this is wool and it is fulled. It has been nicely fulled and it will not ravel. You can see the cut edge, and this is cut well across the bias. No threads hanging off, right? No unraveling. That's the beauty of working with wool. You don't really need to finish your edges. The only reason I'm putting whip stitches to tack it down is to force it to lay flat and nice and neat for when I insert my hand and arm through it, and there's nothing stopping my arm from proceeding smoothly through the silk line sleeve. And we know that gowns in this era had silk linings even when it was wool on the outside, because I have expense accounts, for instance, from Margaret of Denmark, the Queen of Scotland, in the 1470s, that talk about linings, silk linings, being purchased and inserted in her gowns for the sleeves and the bodice, but not for the skirts, interestingly. So that's why this gown is going to be lined in silk to about the hip or mid-thigh, and the sleeves will be lined, but the rest of the skirts will not be. Yeah. So. Let me see. Belfast had a very long history with flax and linen. We have streets named for linen and flax still. I know absolutely nothing about it at all. Should learn more. So I have some information about medieval linen in, not necessarily Belfast, but Ireland in general. There's definite evidence of linen production in Ireland in the Middle Ages, and it having been a desired commodity because Irish linen was exported to medieval England, for instance. And we actually have the archaeology in Waterford, specifically I'm thinking of, they've actually excavated homes that they're pretty certain were linen workshops. Because when you're working with linen, you want humidity. Humidity makes flax stronger. It makes cellulose stronger. That's why when you wash linen, you should put it in a washing machine, turn on the water, let it soak and hydrate fully for a couple of hours before actually continuing with washing. Your linen will last longer. Anyway, so when you process linen, when you ret it, or after you ret it, when you're combing it and turning it into fibers and spinning it and weaving it, you want it to be moist. You want a humid environment. And these houses are actually, you have to step down to get into these buildings, several feet actually. And the ground on these buildings was dirt in the Middle Ages, and packed dirt, not just loose dirt, packed dirt. And that would allow for more humidity in the space. And they've actually found posts where they're pretty certain were the post holes, that there were pretty certain post holes for linen looms. And they've also found like bits of linen in amongst the dirt that they excavated there. So they're pretty certain that there was a thriving linen weaving community, at the very least in Waterford, and it sounds like Belfast as well. Because linen just grows really well in Ireland, and because it's moist there all the time, whether you want it to be or not, it would be great conditions for weaving linen. So yeah. Ireland sounds like the Hokkaido of England. Yeah, a little bit. It is a little bit. See, we always had an idea what we've been doing, sort of. Yeah, right. Yeah, so if you look back, I actually did a presentation with Philip, a live stream presentation a couple of months ago about medieval Irish textiles. If you look that up in my live stream recordings, you'll be able to find it. It's a pretty damn good presentation. Lots of super good information about textiles in medieval Ireland if you're interested. Yeah, and checking that out. I think Belfast concentrated around the Industrial Revolution with the mills and the docks. We still call the working class girls millies. Oh yeah, for certain. I mean, England, of course, had a massive mill industry in the 19th century, but they had a mill industry, a textile mill industry, because first there was a textile industry that wasn't related to factories. So yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Yeah, the mills, it's really our history with the most recent industrial revolution and socioeconomics is fraught and complicated, and it's not all one way. Like they're all good nor all bad. Industrialization did lift some people out of poverty. It also put a lot of people into poverty because of what we did in order to industrialize, things like enclosure acts, for instance. Yeah. Okay, everyone. Well, I am going to pack up and head home because I think I've done everything I can do here, and I need to get up and walk around. I can feel my derriere has lost circulation. So any final questions or comments about medieval material culture, about anything you've seen in other videos I've done or streams? I'll go ahead and open up the floor to any questions of that nature while I pack up, because I do have to pack up. I have a mess of pins here. So while I pack up, I will give you a chance to ask me anything else you may like while I play 3,000 pin pickup, my favorite game as a sewist. This wool feels so nice. I'm petting the silk, but the wool itself is so silky, guys. You have no idea. So wonderful. I would like to take a moment also while I'm packing up to thank my patrons and my channel members and my super chatters and like music for earthworms. If you're still out there, I appreciate you all. I know money is tight these days, and so for those of you who actually go the extra mile to financially support my work to research, recreate, and share knowledge about medieval material culture, I am deeply honored and deeply appreciative of that. But I understand that, of course, everyone's socioeconomics are different. And so I thank all of you, no matter how you support my community, whether it's participating in this chat, hitting the thumbs up all the time, leaving comments all the time, Susan, I see you, and being part of the conversation and just being a positive presence in my life, even in this distal way. I appreciate all the manners in which you've all shown your faith in this community I'm building. I really do. I would also like to thank Armor and Castings for being a channel sponsor by sending me beautiful jewelry to wear. Yeah, Armor and Castings, for those of you who don't know, they are a Ukrainian-based jeweler, goldsmith, and caster that do reproduction historical jewelry and belt fittings and anything beautiful and made of metal. From the Middle Ages, they do it. armorandcastings.com. If you are interested in purchasing some affordable yet lovely replica medieval jewelry, Contessa 10 will get you a 10% discount with them. They are excellent people. I have met them in person. They're also donating proceeds to support the war in Ukraine. And some of their friends and family are on the front or have retooled their own workshops to produce munitions. So isn't that interesting? And for those who are wondering how I'm collecting my pins and don't know what a medieval needle case looks like, this is a replica of a 14/15th century needle case. This is made by Billy and Charlie, not a channel sponsor, but still excellent source for fine quality replica medieval pewter wares. And it looks like a little tower. So cool, right? So I have one for pins and one for needles. And the one for needles is much less beaten up than the one for pins. But some of you heard me say this, and I'll say it again. Unfortunately, I fly a lot. No, fortunately, I fly a lot. I love to travel. Unfortunately, these medieval needle cases look like bullets on an X-ray. And so if I take them in my carry-on, I get searched. If I put them in my checked baggage, my bags get searched. So I've just started putting that in my carry-on, and I pull them out before I go through the TSA, before they go through the X-ray, so that I can just show them outright. Look, it's a needle case. There's no black powder here. Invariably, they get looked at askance. And these would actually normally, this is what this is for, this string came out on this one, I have to restring it. These actually would attach to one's belt, we think. I think I've seen one example of a noblewoman actually with one of these suspended from her belt. So, okay, so I'll show you how that would work. Like this, and then, without removing it from your belt, you just pull the lid up. You don't even have to take it off of your belt. Pretty neat, huh? Of course, I'm not wearing a belt right now, so it's not going on my belt. Also, the way I walk, I would probably injure myself with this. Probably end up with some massive contusions on some part of my body. But yeah, that's just me and my energetic method of locomoting. And I have here, just to combine cultures, I have a lotus blossom pouch that I made, Korean style lotus blossom pouch. And I use this, I call this my sewing poof, because it's kind of poofy. I just put all my portable hand sewing stuff in here. And what's really nice about this magic sewing poof is that my sewing project also fits in it. So, you know, it's a real mélange here. So I also, while I'm packing up, wanted to show you another trick. This is a replica medieval kind of spool, and you'll notice there's no notch for putting thread. None of the extant medieval spools have any kind of locking notches for thread. Probably wasn't an issue because they probably weren't transporting their sewing supplies with them the way we do, we modern medievalists do. But here I have a piece of finger loop braiding that I did from one of my advanced finger loop braiding workshops, and it's not that long. It's a sample piece, but it's the perfect length for using to wrap around these spools and catch the thread like that. And now it won't unbind. It won't unwind. It binds the thread so it won't unwind, and it looks kind of nice and jaunty. And it's a medieval, you know, it's a authentic medieval object to do it, right? No rubber band needed. So that's how I use a lot of the shorter finger loop braidings that I have for my classes, the sampler finger loop braids, yeah. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Sir Reginald. Really appreciate that. Carrot, appreciate you being here today. Shellback, go enjoy the rest of your work day. I'm sorry. Oh, you're in the Navy, right? Yeah. So is today a duty day for you? Yeah. And then for this other spool, I just use a ribbon because again, medieval spool, no notch to lock the thread. So there we go. I heard you say someone speaks imperial. Oh, not imperialist, Christina. If you speak imperial, right? So imperial measurements are the English system of measures, right? You have metric and you have imperial. So some people understand metric measurements, and some people understand imperial measurements. So that's when I say if you speak imperial, it's kind of a linguist joke. I'm a linguist, right? I'm a foreign language specialist. So if you speak imperial, meaning if you compute your measures in imperial measures, so feet and miles and pounds, rather than centimeters and grams. That's what I mean by speak imperial, not imperialist, imperial. Yeah. To be clear. Yeah. Yeah, Carrot, welcome to the community. I'm glad you found me as well. I look forward to seeing you in my next stream, which will hopefully be tomorrow. Oh, Haas, I'm so sorry. We're about to end the stream. I'm just packing up. You're probably just waking up in Europe, right? Oh God, I'm sorry. Hopefully one of my streams will be at a better time for you. I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm really sorry. Tonight, having to remind people about their socks, their shoes yet again. I might be doing cooking today. We'll see how long it takes me to get home and get set up. But maybe tomorrow's live stream I'll do cooking at a time that's good for people in Europe and people who get up early in America. I know it's really hard sometimes with everyone in different parts of the world. I appreciate you, Haz. I'm really sorry that we're about to, but it's good to see you for just a few minutes anyway. So just remember to subscribe, like and subscribe, everyone. And if you had any questions and I didn't answer them in the live chat, then just pop them in the comments once the video posts and I will answer them. If you're watching this as a recording, if you have questions, pop them in the chat in the comments and I will answer them apace. Otherwise, everyone, until next time, may your adventures be creative. Thank you all.